Assalamu alaikum. We got Hamza, Ijaz, Nazam, and Dr. Imran on the panel. The Historicity of the Gospels, Matthew Part 2. I guess we'll go over to Hamza first, maybe a little recap on what we're going to do today.
Oh, really? All right.
Right on the spot.
Basically, I wanted to recap what happened last time, to be honest with you. Because what we did, we presented some things from Matthew. We challenged the authorship of Matthew. We looked at what the church father said, who the author was. And we looked at a few of the prophecies within the Gospel of Matthew. And we had a few Christians come on. And one especially will come on was RC Apologist. And I think since then he's been doing tweets and all sorts about it. But the thing is, I don't think he understood the stream, because we're talking about the historicity of the Gospels. So we're looking at them on their merits. Yeah, we're not applying any theology to it. So if you come on the stream and you're defending for example, the Gospel of Matthew, based upon you believe it's the word of God and all this kind of stuff, then you're kind of ignoring what we're doing, because we're not coming from an Islamic perspective of what the Qur'an says and what we should see and such like that. We're just looking at the claims of the Christians. That's all we've been doing in this whole streams. What the claims of the Christians are and why, and we're seeing whether or not that stacks up historically. That's all. So if you come on here with theological claims, and the irony is this, to be honest with you, see, we're going to expose the author of Matthew that it couldn't be the disciple of Jesus who they think it is. And also, by default, we'll show the errors that this author makes, which would then mean it can't be the word of God. Because if this guy was making mistakes, surely the Holy Spirit would have corrected his mistakes. So we do knock the theology without even trying, to be honest. But that's not the point of what we're doing. So just to recap, today we're waiting for the Christians to come back to what we've already said. So any Christians that are going to come on the stream, please make sure you've seen what's gone on already. Don't come on and go, what's going on here? Make sure you know what you're talking about. Yeah. And if there's no more Christians, like I say, we're going to throw more fuel on the fire, and we'll get this bonfire going. Anyway, that's my input.
Alhamdulillah. I just wanted to point out that for RC Apologists, he actually said in our line of questioning that the evidence wouldn't change his mind. He believes what he believes because it's from God. So when it comes to equal scales and assessing data, we might have different points of view, but if evidence is not the thing which changes your mind, then this might be the wrong stream for you, because the purpose of the stream is to look at the evidence. Brother Darren, I got a question for you. Does the author of Matthew start off his gospel with a genealogy or not?
Yes. I'll be honest with you, I've never understood this. Because the Christians say that the genealogy in Matthew and Luke, I'm not going to go to Luke yet, in Matthew, show and demonstrate that Jesus was descended from King David. So he fulfills a messianic prophecy. I mean, one fault for me is the genealogies of Joseph. So basically, you give a genealogy of Mary's husband to demonstrate what? I don't even understand that. But you've seen other problems with it as well, isn't it?
Well, here's the interesting thing. So we know that before the Gospels were written, Paul's epistles were written, right? The apostolic, the letters, basically. I'm going to read from Titus chapter 3, verse 9. And tell me when you spot the error, yeah? So this is written before Matthew includes a genealogy, before Luke includes a genealogy. This is written before that. And the same God is meant to inspire the authors of Matthew and Luke. Is the same author which allegedly inspired this document. So Titus chapter 3 verse 9 reads, "But avoid foolish speculations, genealogies, quarrels and controversies over the law. They are unprofitable and futile." So the same God that gives you 2 genealogies in the Gospels also tells you avoid them because they lead to foolish quarrels. Can I get an amen? So I'm not sure whether I want us to go with that, but the language used in the letter to Titus is a very peculiar one. It's very harsh language, I would say. And I think that can only come about where people were disputing the genealogy of the Messiah in the first place. And I think the author of Matthew wanted to settle that debate, but as we know today, it just made it worse. Kind of a bit like Liverpool playing in the Premier League. It never adds quality, it just detracts from it. Again, my apologies to Dr. Imran, but I came out with the gloves swinging.
And talking about swinging gloves, I think I mean, it's an excellent quote from Titus 3, but the other thing that really comes to mind is, how can you have a genealogy for a man without an earthly father? Because all of the genealogies go through the father, and it's always been that way, really. And obviously, we all agree, Christians and Muslims, that there was no earthly father for Jesus. So a genealogy is almost an absurdity. But then to make the effort of putting it in such detail, as we're going to go into, inshallah, it sort of begs the question: why did he feel it was necessary? But we'll come to that.
But why genealogy of Joseph?
Absolutely.
As if it proves anything. Okay, you've demonstrated potentially that Joseph was descended from the king of David, potentially. And what? What's that got to do with Jesus?
I want to point out as well that the author, whoever wrote the gospel, actually, Matthew, he includes generations between David. I think he mentions Abraham as well. I could be wrong. But then at the end of it, he recounts that these are 14 generations. Problem is, there weren't 14 generations between Jesus and David. There was some more. So he took out the ones that I guess were superfluous, but then that does not give us an accurate genealogy. So either it's inaccurate or it's tampered with. And in this case, it's tampered with. So what's the point in appealing to it in the first place?
Yeah. But it's a tampered genealogy of Joseph. I can't get past that. Honestly, it's like, what's the point? What does it demonstrate?
Now,
then,
go on. Sorry, just to be clear, we're not laughing because we want to be mean. It's just the way that it's being presented is a bit funny to us when you look at it from our perspective. But
just the idea that, and the author of Matthew actually goes to prophecy to demonstrate this genealogy of Joseph.
Hold on, whoever Maz V is, please take that down. I'll grant you a refund. I think that was supremely offensive. We know that Chelsea is the best sister. I mean, consider it. I hope I'm not sure if you're a sister or a brother, to be honest. I mean, I'll reward you for your donation, but I want to point out that the only Liverpool supporter on this platform today is wearing blue. That's it.
Me as well. I'm a Liverpool.
Oh,
what?
There's two.
Brother Darren, this fitna is growing. Okay.
Imagine when they win. Honestly.
Nope. Never going to happen.
Anyway, any Christians in the chat?
Did we send out the link? I'm not sure.
Oh.
So just to, I think if I can, because what we're really inviting the Christians to do is now deal with some of the things that have been raised in the previous stream as well as this stream. So I just want to very quickly touch on some of the points. So Brother Ijaz mentioned in the last stream that there were just a few early papyri that referred to Matthew, P103 and P104. And they're just maybe 5 or 6 verses each with holes in them, and they don't correspond to, say, the Codex Sinaiticus, for example, when you compare the verses together. The original works were untitled, so there was no title given to them, and these were all the titles that were attributed and were attributed later on. There's a tradition of Papias mentioning that the author was the author of Matthew, but he seems to be referring to a Hebrew text because he talks about the Hebrew gospel, written in the language of the Hebrews. And obviously, the Matthew that we have access to is in Greek. And the Matthew that we have access to also quotes from the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Old Testament, 300 years BC, which is written for the use of the Jews who didn't speak Hebrew in the diaspora, as Brother Nazam mentioned. So all of these point towards somebody who was not not fitting the characteristics of the person who would have written the Greek manuscript that we have now. So we have two different texts being referred to by two different authors in two different traditions. The other interesting thing, actually, now that we've moved on to it, we've got some other information that's been sent out there, is that if you look at the genealogy that we have in the beginning of Matthew, we've raised a few even in jest, we've raised a few points about it. So the first thing we raised about it is, how could you have a genealogy of a man who doesn't have an earthly father? Why would you give a genealogy to Jesus of Joseph? And why then in the genealogy that you're going to give would you leave out people that were part of the genealogy? So all of these things have been raised, and these are trying to highlight that this was written in a way to make a point as opposed to reflect history. So if the Christian brothers and sisters out there could kindly come on and discuss this with us, we'd appreciate that.
Yeah, and the other thing we mentioned last time as well was about King Herod and the idea that the census, and how that King Herod apparently ordered the killing of all babies born in the last 2 years, in and around Bethlehem. And this was the reason why Mary and Joseph had to flee to Egypt. And we saw how the author of Matthew then corrupts Old Testament in Hosea to try and demonstrate that God is calling his son from Egypt. So all the time, the author of Matthew is trying to plant this seed that this is fulfilling prophecy. This is fulfilling prophecy. Now, the problem we have with this, I mean, we've got plenty to throw on the bonfire today, no problem. But the problem we're having with this is deliberate. And the problem is the prophecy that's being used from the Old Testament isn't meant for this. It's being butchered, it's being twisted, it's being fabricated, even made up. I mean, and we spoke about how, for example, King Herod was the one who did this atrocity, killing all these babies. And we had somebody come on the actual stream trying to believe only 3 babies would have been born in 2 years in around Bethlehem. I mean, it's madness. But anyway,
I don't want to mention that, but
yeah, well, we have to mention it, yeah.
Sure.
And the thing is, you see, their favorite historian, Flavius Josephus, the ones that Christians love to parade around on their flags, he was writing about the atrocities of King Herod, and yet he never mentions this. So you have to ask yourself, if your great historian that you rely upon is telling you about the crucifixion, which you believe, why are you not questioning why he's not recording this great census? Then the question needs to be asked, if history is being fabricated, for what reason? That will tell you there's an agenda behind the author of Matthew, which will tell you then that this is not recording history, this is making history. And there's a big difference here.
Absolutely. And underlying all of this is a glaring fact. And I think that it was mentioned, but I'd re-emphasize it. And that glaring fact is that Matthew is attributed to a disciple of Jesus, but we know that he copies verbatim, word for word, 75 to 90% of Mark, who was a non-disciple. So we have a disciple, theoretically, copying his account of what happened during Jesus' life from a non-disciple. Please, somebody explain that to me whenever you get an opportunity.
So, brothers, I wanted to know if you've noticed a change in the way that Christians do their dawah to Muslims now. I've realized both on my new Twitter account, which is my name, so I'm like, where's it? There we go. Follow me on Twitter. But now that I've said that, I've come to notice that most of the people I'm interacting with now seem to be saying to me, we don't say it's historical. It's purely theological. And they seem to forget that we have, but I myself have more than a decade experience doing dawah back and forth on apologetics. They have always said to me that this is historical. So I think it has motivated them to drop that claim. It's like, we know we can't defend it, so let's just stick to what we can trust, the theology of it. I'm waiting to see what happens when we start doing the theological claim.
Well, at least we can welcome the change, because the Christians have been saying for generations, eyewitness testimony, written by those, and this is going out the window. Subhanallah. And just by analysis that we're doing, I mean, obviously there's much more information, but this is what all we could present really is the surface things that we're doing, but we're trying to get a bit of depth to that. But there's so much more information that can be gone into. I'm glad they're changing their ways, Brother Ijaz.
Well, alhamdulillah, I say, you know what? In this way, even the way that we presented the material, we're still trying to simplify, in some cases, what is a lot of technical information. One very angry pastor, I'm going to keep quoting this guy because he cracks me up. Ijaz, how can you quote that when you know you need a mathematician to work it out? Blood, it's in the Bible. I'm just reading from your Bible. Right? What did you expect me to do? Not read from it? I don't understand. And the whole point is, I welcome this change, yes, but when I look at the comments, I still see every week you get the 1 or 2 odd people who will say it's definitely historical. Come on the stream. No. So I don't know what's happening there. And I think we have been fair. Let me just clear the air on one thing. The idea that we are not neutral, I understand. I understand. But we're not discussing the theology of it. What we are discussing is what historical information does this bring to us? And our methodology has simply been to ask, well, what is the basis for this information? I would imagine that a Christian would ask the same question. And as you guys have noticed, Christians who came on the stream, they would agree with us. Yeah, that's a typo. Yeah, the guy probably made a mistake. Yeah, like what we heard last week and the week before and the week before that. So we're not saying anything different than what the Christians themselves have already concluded. So there seems to be an ijma, a consensus on this matter. And we're not pointing a gun at anyone's head and say, agree with us. They choose to come on. All we do is we put the link out and they speak for themselves. So the point that we disagree on how to interpret the evidence because we may be biased is disproven by the fact that Christians who are already biased when it comes to the Bible accept our points and even go one step further. Whereas we limited ourselves to say this is problematic historically, they plainly say no, the Bible has a typo. So not even a matter of interpretation. In the very letters that are written, a mistake has been made. So they go one step beyond. Hashtag Chelsea Football Club there as well. So that's a really old song. I'm not sure if you know that song, Hamza. No?
Madness. Of course I know it.
Okay, I got worried for a second because you look stunned. But okay, I forgive you. So I hope our Christian brothers and sisters understand the point. You have come to us Muslims and say, read our Bible, see what it says, and you will understand that it is accurate, not just in what it says, but in the information it presents. And we have said we have looked and we have rejected.
Nazam, would you like to add anything?
Since last week, I tried to look more into the authorship of Matthew's Gospel, and I still hold to the view that Matthew probably wasn't written by a disciple of Jesus. One of the additional reason that I came up with this week is to do with a certain proof text that Matthew uses from the Old Testament. It's actually from Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. And Matthew uses this in relation to Jesus' entrance to Jerusalem. But before Jesus enters Jerusalem, he instructs his disciples to go to a certain place, and there they will discover two animals. And basically, the disciples bring the animals to him and put a garment over them. And then basically, Jesus rides two donkeys into Jerusalem. However, this was a misunderstanding of the author of Matthew, because everyone who knows Hebrew poetry would know that in Hebrew poetry, often they will repeat the same thing but use different words. And in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, it mentions donkeys, but it uses two different words for donkeys. But Matthew read it so literal that he read it as two donkeys, and so he has Jesus before he enters into Jerusalem sitting and riding on two donkeys.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was written by some Jewish author, then he would have known this kind of Hebrew convention in Hebrew poetry. So this will be like another reason, technical reason, as to why the Gospel of Matthew wasn't written by a Jewish follower of Jesus.
No, was it written by a man inspired by God.
So that's really poignant, because what you're demonstrating again is that the person who wrote Matthew didn't really understand the Hebrew.
Yes, and whereas Papias says the person who wrote the Gospel of Matthew wrote in Hebrew, so
that definitely what we can say is that these two people are different individuals. The
seems
person
that way,
referring to and the person that wrote two donkeys need to be ridden into Jerusalem are two different people.
And I say this not for entertainment, but just for the purpose of like trying to understand one another's different perspectives and why Muslims may see it differently from our Christian friends.
I noticed as well that one of the apologetic responses to that claim is that Jesus, in fact, only rode one donkey into Jerusalem and the other donkey just followed behind him. And I don't understand that claim because I think technically that's not what the text says.
No.
Nazam, could you remind me of the reference for that text? Do you recall it?
Yeah, sorry, it's in Matthew. I should have mentioned the reference. It's in Matthew chapter 21. It ends at verse 11, and it's also about half a dozen verses as well before that. So it's probably Matthew chapter 21 verses 6 to 11.
Guys, we have two people waiting. Whenever you want.
Let me just add to that just 1 second. Sorry, because what happens, you see, Matthew doesn't just describe this event; he actually ascribes it to prophecy. So he says,
Yes,
this took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet, saying, "Tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." So he actually, like you said, he misinterprets the Old Testament, but at the same time, he writes a false history. Because you can misinterpret it, for example, not realizing that it was talking about the colt that was supposed to be just one animal. So he's misunderstood that point, which I can understand if he doesn't understand Hebrew. But he's supposed to be recording what happened. So he's actually recording Jesus onto animals. Do you get me? So he's not just mistaken what the prophecy should be. He's actually falsely wrote history to match that prophecy, which again, once more demonstrates the author is manufacturing history rather than recording it.
yeah, and it does literally say that Jesus rode, like they sat Jesus on them.
I know.
On them applies animals.
Well, one response I've heard is that they say, no, it's talking about the cloaks because the disciples put cloaks over them and Jesus sat on them, and the them is supposed to mean the cloaks, not the animals. But your problem is Matthew's trying to match a prophecy which he's misunderstood, which requires two animals. So it collapses whenever they try to defend it, to be honest.
Yep.
But that does point out that even that explanation is that they understand there's a problem with the way Matthew's reported things. Because you need to explain the them away, which is interesting, I don't know. So it's almost an admission of we see the problem here.
And you wouldn't refer to a garment as them, but as an it.
No, there was numerous garments apparently because they put their cloaks. So the cloaks is plural, which I get.
Okay.
But when Matthew is trying to say this prophecy was fulfilled, and in that prophecy is talking about two animals, which he's mistaken. He's recorded history as two animals. That's all I'm trying to say. So when they try to rebut it with that nonsense about cloaks, unfortunately Matthew's misunderstood and he's manufactured history.
Interesting.
Who's in the chat, Jordan?
So we have a return customer, Rafa.
When you say return customer, I kind of shudder. Go on. Who else?
Rafa.
There is a guy that hasn't been on as well. His name is Daniel. Daniel Oriello.
Give Daniel a flex then. Give Daniel a
go. If we prioritize new Christians, that would be good, inshallah.
Yes. Yeah. We know what's going to move around.
We can. Hello, welcome to the stream.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, brother. So, do you have a point about Matthew?
Hi, Daniel.
What do you say, Jordan?
What point did you want to come on and make about the Gospel of Matthew?
Oh, I just want to point out that first of all, I'm not a traditional Christian. I'm from the Hebrew roots movement.
Oh my God.
So I'm not. I don't believe in Paul, the Apostle Paul. I don't believe in Luke. I don't believe in Acts. But
don't say you don't believe in Matthew.
Yeah?
Don't say you don't believe in Matthew, please.
I believe it. I believe in some way in Matthew.
You say yourself, my friend.
No. Let me explain.
I think you're on our side, Daniel.
I've been hearing you, listening to you, because I know the Gospels have been corrupted, right? We have this Catholic religion that grab all the scriptures and corrupted it. And the thing is that I want to point out or point you to you guys. I'm sorry because of my English is not that good.
Seems good.
Your English is very good.
Oh, thank you. But the thing is that I want to point out the Shem version of Matthew. I don't know if you know about the Shem version of Matthew?
No, I've never heard.
No.
Of it.
Okay.
What's Shem Tov? What's Shem Tov mean?
No, Shem Tov is a rabbi from. Let me see.
So it's a Jewish understanding of Matthew. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there is a version in Hebrew of Matthew. I don't know if you're talking about only about the Greek version. So, if you don't mind, I could.
No, we would be willing to listen to your argument either way.
Okay, the first
Yeah, we would be
thing
willing
is
to listen
that
to you, though.
in here,
I think it's much later.
I can. What?
Go ahead, Daniel.
What do you say?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, if you share screen, I can then. I think I can. Yeah, I can click it on the.
Okay. Wait a second. Share screen. Okay. Nice. First of all, the genealogy. I don't know if I said it correctly.
Yeah.
Of Jesus or Yeshua in Matthew chapter 1.
Brother, before you continue, could you just do me a favor? Could you tell us when does this date from? When is this gospel you're referring to, the Shem Tov's version? When does it date from?
Okay, the Shem Tov. I don't know where is the composition date, but this is a rabbi from the century, the 14th century.
So this is written in the 14th century.
No, well, in
Yeah, he wrote it in 1380 and then he revised it in 1385.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading. Wow, that's mad. What's going on the scale? Oh, there we go.
Yeah. He's reading from the Spanish version of the English article. I just got that.
Yeah, I'm on Wikipedia as well.
Yeah.
But I don't understand the point though.
So, brother, if you could make your point, brother, that would appreciate that.
No, but I think what you need to
Daniel,
do, Daniel, before you bring us your evidence, can you explain the point you're trying to make?
Can you hear us, Daniel?
I think you might have muted yourself, or you're not on the stream.
He's not on mute.
Okay.
He's not even there.
Is he in the chat?
Oh wait.
There he is.
Okay.
Sorry, brother. Yeah.
Daniel, sorry to disturb you. Listen, first, tell us the point you're making before you go to your Wikipedia.
Okay.
What is the point you're trying to establish?
That in the genealogy, in the Hebrew version, it says Abi, Joseph, Abi, Miriam. It means that this genealogy is not about Joseph. It's about Miriam.
Mary.
Mary. Well.
All right, but her genealogy doesn't go back to King David.
Yes.
She's a Levite.
Yes.
She's a different tribe.
No, the thing is that it's the same. It's the same thing as the Greek version, only that when it says husband of Mary
It means father. It means father.
It means father.
Right, but Daniel, listen to what I said to you.
Yes.
Mary's lineage is not to the tribe of Judah. Her lineage is to the tribe of Levi. So if you're trying to say the genealogy in Matthew is of Mary, yeah.
I mean, where do you come with this that she's from Levi?
Who Mary?
Yeah.
Are you not aware that she's from the line of Moses?
I mean, she's referred to as the cousin of Elizabeth, and Elizabeth in Luke chapter 1 is referred to as the daughter of Aaron.
You're talking about Luke.
No, don't get derailed that way. Let's establish a basic principle. Are you aware or not that Mary is related to Moses?
Not at all.
Right, that's fine. So here's the thing you see. When you do the genealogy of Mary, you will see she's not from the tribe of Judah. She's from the tribe of Levi through her genealogy.
Okay. But what I'm asking you, where do you get this information from?
He just told you.
Luke, the Gospel of Luke?
It's circumstantial. I mean, the Bible doesn't record Mary's genealogy, but Jeff may assume that because she's the cousin of Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is referred to as being the daughter of Aaron, that Mary was also a Levite, and also from the Qur'an perspective as well, that she's referred to as the sister of Aaron in the Quran, and her heritage seems to be a priestly heritage because she was raised in the temple.
With Zachariah,
Okay, but
Yeah.
now I'm confused because we're analyzing the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew has to stand alone, right?
Sure. And you
Because
reject
Luke
the other
was-
Gospels. Do you
what's-
only accept Matthew's Gospel, Daniel?
If I accept Matthew Gospel,
Do you only believe in Matthew and not in any of the other Gospels?
only I believe in Matthew.
Okay.
I'm testing John. I'm testing also Matthew. But the thing is that I have a Hebrew version of Matthew.
Yeah, but your Hebrew version is from the 14th century, and it was written by a man who was fighting against Christianity.
The thing is that even the scholars admits that there is a difference between the composition date and the copy date.
So what was the composition date?
Well, we don't know.
Well, we do 1380 when he said he wrote it.
He copied it.
From what?
From
What
what?
did he say he copied it from?
No, this is the thing. This is the thing. Okay, let me explain you this. First of all, I cannot rely in Luke's version if we're analyzing only the Gospel of Matthew, right? Because first of all, Luke was probably written by Lucius Maximus Plutarch. Right?
We're not going into this right now.
Okay, we understand where you're coming from. We agree with your approach so far.
So let's don't bring
focus only on Matthew.
The discussion, right? Yeah.
So focus only on Matthew. That's fine. Go ahead, brother.
Okay. Now, in the Gospel of Matthew, we have in here in my screen. Are you seeing my screen?
We're not.
Are you looking at the Wikipedia thing again?
It's okay, brother. It's okay. Let me make his point.
What?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Daniel.
Okay. Well, in here, the genealogy, right? If we look in this, we can see Joseph, Abi, Miriam. And in here, the same thing. Joseph, Abi, Miriam. That's two versions of manuscripts of Matthew. And the thing is that it proves that this is the genealogy of, it could be the genealogy of Mary and not Joseph, right?
Okay, so that's your foundational claim, basically, right? That's the basis for your claim. No,
I want to make another point, please. If you
make your second point.
Okay. First of all, we seeing here in the Hebrew Matthew. The Hebrew Matthew uses Punk's word, or did I make myself clear? Punk words.
Yeah,
like
loan words.
That it pronounces almost the same way, two words, like a game of words.
Oh, I see. Yeah, puns.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it. Puns. Yeah.
For example, we see here in Matthew chapter 9, verse 8, and the crowds saw Vayiru, right? And they feared Vayiru very much. Also in here, Matthew chapter 12, verse 13 and 15, right? Then he said to the man, stretch out your hand, and he stretched out Vayet, right? His hand, and in the verse 15, And it was after this that Yeshua knew, and he turned bayat. From there, and many sick people went after him. So there's another one, if you don't mind.
I think we get the point of the,
okay, right.
the puns. Yeah,
so this is impossible if something was written, if Matthew was written in Greek, you cannot come across with these similarities between the pronunciation, because this is so used in the writings of the Tanakh. So it proves that Papia was right, that the version that Matthew wrote was Hebrew, not Greek, not Aramaic. And there's a good lecture that this guy, Nehemiah Gordon, this scholar, Nehemiah Gordon, presents solid evidences of this. Obviously, this is not, I cannot say this is the original version, because we know that it is from the 14th century. So
Daniel, can I ask you a question? Sorry, I think we're getting the understanding. Is that okay, guys? You understand what he's trying to say?
Yep, I think we understand.
So you seem to be pointing towards the uses of the language to say that this is definitely Hebrew composition, and therefore must be referring to a Hebrew Matthew. But the version that you're referring to is a 14th century version. But you're saying that it was copied from something earlier, and you seem to be suggesting, and just correct me if you're wrong, that this was copied from the earliest Matthew that Papias was referring to. Now, if that is what you're saying, obviously 14 centuries ago is 14th century is only 600 years ago. We would have texts of this if it was copied from something in existence at the time.
Maybe if the Catholic Church doesn't want to.
So you think they have it and they're not releasing
show the truth? They will.
So if I may interject here, Daniel.
Yes.
Would I be correct in saying that you're a Hebrew Israelite in terms of your beliefs?
What?
Would I be correct in saying that you're a Hebrew Israelite in terms of your beliefs?
Amen.
Right, so you're a Black Hebrew Israelite, basically, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, Daniel, just very quickly, you do realize that we have manuscripts of the New Testament all over the world, right? That they're not hidden away from us, largely speaking. So, if the point stands that we have all these manuscripts, and one of them is Hebrew, and the first time a Hebrew one comes to the surface is in the 14th century, what does that tell us?
No, it could tell us that.
Jordan, can you put the screen back to normal, please? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. It could tell us that it's probably that the Greek version is the original, right? But there is a possibility that this Hebrew version could be considered a kind of or a copy from another copy of the original Hebrew.
It can't be considered.
Let me explain why. Because there is impossible that if we translate, that if we compose the version of the Greek version of Matthew, that when we translate in the Hebrew, it has it there per words. It's impossible. That only means that this was written first in the Hebrew language.
So, Daniel, just quickly, the only way that you say that they're upon words is because you choose those words when you translate it, not because you have a Hebrew manuscript where you found those words and then use that as evidence. So, Shem Tov, just to be clear, he translated it from what? You don't know, right? So, if he had all,
it doesn't say it doesn't say that he translated it.
It said he copied it, right?
He copied.
Right. And so this copy magically went where?
What?
This copy, if the Catholic Church was hiding it, how was he able to copy it?
No, he was a Jewish rabbi.
Right. So if you just said the Catholic Church wanted to prevent him from copying it, is that correct?
I'll say that yes, if I'm the Catholic Church, I would like to suppress all the Hebrew influence from the Gospel.
So how did he?
And that's why they did in the Luke version.
So where did he get it from then to copy it?
I don't know, man. I'm just pointing that there's a version, that there's a Hebrew version that if you translate the Greek version to Hebrew, it will have pun words and this is a proof that there's only possible that this was written first in the Hebrew language. You cannot have a pun word by accident.
Could I give you an explanation? Possible.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can I give you a possible explanation?
Yes, of course.
So we know that we don't have access to anything that Shem Tobs may have copied. We don't have access to that, right? We only have what he wrote in 14th century.
Yes, yeah.
We know he was a rabbi, Hebrew rabbi, yeah. So, and we know he was familiar, obviously, with the Old Testament and this use of words, yeah. So when he was composing his Hebrew Matthew, why didn't he just use the rhetorical devices that were already available to him? So why didn't he use the pawn words that were available already to him in this new composition that he made?
Yes, that is a possibility. But the thing is that you can't ignore that if you translate the Greek version to the Hebrew language, you will have these pawn words.
Yeah. We just explained that to you.
We agree with you actually, and I think you're agreeing with us as well.
Yeah.
But we've just given an explanation for that.
I'm just pointing that there is a possibility, or not a possibility, that the Matthew version was written in Hebrew, because there's no way that this by accident will have pun words.
No, we can deliberately. They'll matter. We just look. Daniel.
Yes.
Imran just explained it to you. He said to you the rabbi was aware of the rhetorical devices which could be to use. So why could he not just use them?
Okay, let's forget for a moment that there's no Shem Tov version, right?
We can't. That's what your evidence is built on.
No, let me finish. Let's say there's no Shem Tov version.
Then you have no version at all then.
That's right. But if we translate the Greek version to the Hebrew, then we will still have these pun words in the verses. So
Daniel, do you realize that the translator chooses the words when they translate it?
It doesn't matter.
It matters, because I can use it in the sense that it's not a pun. I can say instead of the word saw, that they looked, and suddenly it's no longer a pun.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I'm gonna come with a phrase. If I say my soul, my soul is so like so much my name. It doesn't has any sense. But if we translate it to the Hebrew verse, to the Hebrew, then that will be mean we will use neshama and shem. There will be a game of words that does not how can I say, that's not that it can be a coincidence.
We understand. I think we agree with you.
Yeah.
We have an explanation for that. Daniel, you're a very nice gentleman. It was very nice to speak.
Can I ask you one last question before Daniel goes?
Oh yeah, of course, please.
Do you believe the author of Matthew was a disciple of Jesus?
I don't know.
Oh, good man. All right.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Daniel, it's very nice to meet you.
Do you believe it's historical?
Historical?
Yeah.
I'm testing it.
Good man.
Okay, this is good.
Daniel, keep watching, man. When we come to the Qur'an, you'll be taking your shahada, inshallah.
Yeah.
I would like to talk about the Tanakh and the Islam. So another time, but please, because I want to know how can you match these two things.
All right, don't worry about it. We'll deal with it. Daniel,
Daniel, nice one.
Very nice gentleman, actually. Interesting. slightly circular in reasoning, but alhamdulillah.
No, you
So
you get a very good explanation there, Imran.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So what he was saying is that he believes there is a Hebrew original, which we've already referred to when we introduced the topic that Papias was referring to. He believes that's hidden by the Catholic Church, and they don't want anyone to be aware of it. But somehow there was a person in the 14th century who managed to copy this, and because there are rhetorical devices in that match the Old Testament, this must prove that it's original. But of course, if a Hebrew person is writing and is aware of the Old Testament rhetorical devices, he could simply use them when he's writing. It wasn't evidential enough for us historically. And it's because he was quite skeptical about a lot of the historicity of most of the New Testament. So alhamdulillah.
And I'm glad he didn't believe that Matthew was a disciple, nor was he writing history.
Absolutely.
I don't think that the Hebrew Israelites even accept Jesus as like the Christ or the Messiah.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, I was interested in at least hearing his perspective, because if you just go on YouTube and you type in Black Hebrew Israelites, that's their name. I'm not trying to make a political statement here, just to be clear. That's what they call themselves, right? I don't want Jordan to boot me from the platform today. But
it's bandana out. Be careful.
Black Hebrew Israelites, they have a penchant for conspiracy theories, and so for someone like that to come and say, well, the evidence comes from a 14th century manuscript, and then we ask him, well, why did no one else have access to it? Why didn't the author himself tell us where he got it from? Because provenance, where something comes from, tells you a little bit about its potential authenticity or its lack thereof. And I realized that perhaps it is he didn't have answers, and that he was reading from the Wikipedia article and then referring to a YouTube video. It just seemed a bit circular in his reasoning to me, a little bit.
They seem a very young man. May Allah guide him, inshallah.
I mean, he looks younger than me, to be honest, and I'm pretty young myself, so who knows? Young and single.
So, Brother Jordan, that's a hint to you, my friend.
Yeah, I saw. I gathered that. I've got a few banners for later.
There's someone in the chat called Jason Kendall, right? Come on, man. Come on screen. You're there saying trust Matthew and the translator's got it right. Come on.
We've actually got 3 people. So yeah, 3 people in our queue. Can I just ask a Hebrew Christian, is that the same? Go on.
They're not Christians in the least. They consider themselves to be the real Hebrews. Like they're the real Israelites. And okay, it's a bit conspiratorial, and I don't want this video to get flagged for saying these things because it can potentially be anti-Semitic, but just basically Black Hebrew Israelites believe that they are the real Jews and the real Jews are fake Jews.
Yeah.
And if you notice anything about them, just type in Black Hebrew Israelite fights. If you think Muslims are bad at giving dawah, these guys are a whole other level. They're like getting fights with people.
The park. I've met these guys, and they're not too keen on people of lighter complection.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask them why they believe the Bible's a reliable source of information, to be honest with you.
Apparently they don't, Darren.
Half of it.
Inshallah.
All that business. Anyway.
All right, so shall we bring Rafa on then?
Oh,
not Benitez, is it?
Who's the 3?
So we got Tony Palace, Reese, and Musa. We got as well. So we got 4 currently.
Okay, Hamza.
Tony Palace sounds like Sam again.
I don't know.
Yes, ex-Stoke City manager. Sounds like Sam. Who else?
Reese.
Give Reese a shot, because Rafa, we know what he's going to do. Rafa, we'll have a cup of tea with Rafa at the end. You know what I mean? Go on, bring Reese on. Reese must have some facts.
Tony Pullis has just gone, so you probably were right on that one.
Well, you know.
So here comes.
Not the greatest disguise.
Yo, what's up, guys? How's it going?
Hi, Reese.
Welcome, Reese. Nice to speak to you.
Cool. Welcome back.
So, thanks, man. so Jesus Christ was crucified. That's the fact. I think that's the most important thing. We have this corroborated by Roman historians.
Wrong stream, my friend. We're talking about the Gospel of Matthew, not the crucifixion.
So you want to talk about the genealogy? Is that what you want to talk about?
The entire Gospel.
The Gospel.
You're supposed to watch this, like read the title of the topic, the historicity of the Gospel of Matthew.
Okay, I mean that's fine. Like, you know, there are parts of it that are corroborated and parts that are not. I mean, sure, you can go ahead and say, hey, maybe a literal dove didn't come down and like Jesus when he got baptized, right? But that's not, you can't prove that or disprove that either way unless you have corroborating historical evidence, right? So I don't really see how you can disprove that.
Let me just make it easy for you, just very quickly. Do you believe the author of Matthew was a disciple of Jesus?
No, I don't think he literally followed Jesus around and saw him.
Oh, fantastic.
It was an oral history that they passed down and wrote down.
Right. So
that's how the Gospels happened.
So it wasn't writing eyewitness testimony, it's basically hearsay.
It was oral history preserved from the disciples of Jesus Christ. The people that saw Jesus, the actual apostles, they passed down oral history that was later written down.
So you don't believe Matthew was one of those apostles?
No, I don't think Matthew was literally one of the 12 or one of the disciples. He wrote down the oral history that was passed down. Like, this is oral history
why'd you go
in written form.
Why'd you go against church?
Excuse me?
Has Darren frozen?
Wait, repeat that. What'd you say?
Question.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
We lost that little bit, Darren.
He's frozen again.
He's frozen, dude.
Sorry, Reese. The question he was asking was, why do you go against the testimony of the early church fathers, such as Papias?
Well, I mean, it depends on which church father you're talking about. I mean, Augustine would agree with me that it's like oral history. I mean, the church fathers disagreed with each other too. That's okay. Not everything they wrote was inspired by God. Sure. Oral history is more nuanced than that, or church tradition, rather.
So on this respect, why do you go against some and not others?
Because what's logical, right? What makes logical sense here? That Mark was literally there. I mean, where was Mark? Why didn't they write about, hey, Mark was there with the other 12 apostles too? Like, it doesn't say that in the gospel. But I mean, what we do know is that at Pentecost, Jesus Christ gave the gift of tongues to the apostles, so they were able to pass down the oral history, like we know. But I guess we're talking about Matthew, right?
Yeah. Do you believe Matthew used Mark as a source to write his own gospel?
Yes, that I do believe. That Mark was the earliest written out of the four, and that they drew inspiration. They used it as a source, like you said.
Since about 90% of Matthew's gospel is based upon Mark, do you believe 90% of Matthew's gospel is not based upon oral tradition, but based upon Mark's gospel?
I mean, Mark was a student of Peter, okay, the apostle, the first pope, Peter, and he wrote Mark from Peter's account. So technically that's oral tradition. So technically Mark is also oral tradition. So yes, like you said, yes, Mark was the source for Matthew, and then the extra stuff because Matthew has some extra stuff, right? That comes from oral tradition.
So you believe what Matthew, the author of Matthew, wrote was historical?
I believe that it was oral tradition of the time, yes.
Of the historical event?
Yes, passed down, right, because Peter and the apostles were passing down the oral history, and I think that Matthew records the oral history that they were passed down.
Right. So
are you a Catholic, Reese?
Yes.
I caught that when you referred to Peter as the first pope. So then you place a lot of basis on apostolic succession. Would that be right?
Absolutely. That's why Mark is so important, because he was a son of Peter.
Allegedly. We've dealt with that on the Mark. It would have been good to have you on the Mark stream. I'm not sure if we did or we didn't.
No, we definitely did.
We didn't? Okay, brilliant. So, Reese, it would be better for you if you focused on the Gospel of Matthew, because that's where we're at right now. So you said that this was oral history, and Darren mentioned, well, you believe it's hearsay, you say no. So how do you distinguish between what oral history is and what hearsay is at that time?
Well, we had a council. We had the Council of Nicaea to pretty much kick out the books that were not.
That's at 325, and Council of Nicaea had nothing to do with books. Let's focus.
There were a bunch of books at the time. So when Matthew written. Okay, wait. Do you want to say something? Sorry.
No, I'm asking you. How do you differentiate at the time that when this gospel was written, allegedly, but in the first century? personally don't believe it was fully written then, but still the point is, Darren mentioned to you, how do you distinguish between oral history, as you put it, and hearsay within that oral tradition? Where do you distinguish between the two, and how do you arrive at the idea that it's not hearsay, but rather history as it happened?
Because the main ideas do not contradict each other. When you have Matthew and Mark, you still have like the death and resurrection of Christ. Like,
but they don't
you
contradict,
still have
because,
the
as
main
we said, one
theme.
copied from the other.
Yeah, exactly. But
Because
some
they copied from
copies,
each other.
yes, but some copies are different than the original source, like the Gospel of Thomas, right? Like there were other Gospels at the time that we do not accept, though. Matthew, we do accept because it corroborates with the other Gospels.
So
just to be copied from them, of course, it's going to corroborate.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a copy, which is good that they copied out of the same source. We preserved it. But very well preserved.
No, but you can't say corroborates if it copies it, can you?
That's a corroboration, though, because it's a different author.
No, Matthew plagiarizes Mark for 70% of his information.
But not the other 30%. There's still oral history that he added that does not contradict.
All right, so I'll give you an example. We were speaking about King Herod and all that. Do you believe that happened, where King Herod ordered the killing of the babes and they fled to Egypt and all of these things? You believe that's
we don't have historical evidence of that happening.
Though. But do you believe it was? Well, now we're trying to understand: is the author of Matthew writing historical? Oral tradition, or is he recording manufacturing history? What's the script?
I mean, personally, I believe that it happened, but I'm talking about scholastically. I don't know of any sources historically that corroborate Herod killing babies.
So why do you believe it happened?
I mean, no. My point, all right, look, I'm going to go ahead and grant you that there is no historical evidence of it happening. But, I mean, how can you prove it didn't happen? Like, my point is that it's moot. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, why would we discuss this?
Reese, I'll tell you why we discuss this. Because we've said, and I've said, that the author of Matthew is recording hearsay. You seem to say he's recording historical oral tradition, which is fine.
Yeah.
So I asked you about a simple fact about King Herod killing the babies. You say there's no historical information supporting that, but you believe it happened. And then you're asking me, is there any evidence against it? So we've already presented Josephus as a witness, that he was the one recording the atrocities of King Herod, and yet he never mentioned this.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Right. So how do you? So basically, the question that needs to be answered by yourself is, why are you believing it happened?
I mean, okay. If let's say Josephus did not record it, like you said, okay, yeah, that's true. I've actually looked at Josephus, right? Mm-hmm. Josephus does corroborate Jesus Christ dying, by the way.
Okay, forget that.
But okay. So
it's a resurrection. Don't worry. Continue. Go on.
Herod, right? So let's say Herod did not happen. Let's say that never happened, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter, because the point of the Bible is to record God's way of living.
Shall I tell you why it matters?
Like, the Bible isn't a history book; it's a way of life.
Shall I tell you why it matters? That was fantastic. Okay. That's what we demonstrated. Anyway.
Okay, wait. Why does it matter?
I'll tell you why it matters, right? Because the author of Matthew not only recorded fake history, he actually used prophecy out of the Old Testament to corroborate what he was saying. So he's trying to create this a fulfilled prophecy, which it wasn't. Now, the question that tells you is that the author of Matthew has an agenda. Do you understand? He's manufacturing history.
No, I mean, he was inspired by God, is the way that we understand it.
No. Sorry, you have to leave your theology at the door in this stream, yeah? We're dealing with history, right? Theology is one thing. Now, if you want to bring your inspired by God to the table, I don't mind knocking out the park very quickly. Okay. If he was inspired by God, he wouldn't make mistakes when he referred to the Old Testament. He wouldn't invent false prophecy. He wouldn't claim things existed which never existed. He wouldn't take prophecy out of context to apply to a non-existent historical event if God was inspiring him, because God would have corrected him.
What? Unless God wanted the message. The central message is not a historical one.
Okay.
The central message is that in case of persecution, you're being persecuted and still be a good person.
Of the Bible is what did you say? The message of the Bible is not historical. The central message is not historical. I'm not going to disagree. I'm going to applaud you and say, yes, we agree.
The message is that you're being persecuted and you should still be a good person anyway.
Thank you.
Well,
That's
then-
the point of King Herod's story.
I said leave the theology at the door. We're doing a stream here to question the historicity of the claims of the Gospels. And you've come on and said they're not historical.
Well,
So-
parts are historical and parts are not historical.
Thank you.
The crucifixion was historical.
For you.
The crucifixion of Jesus Christ is historical, and we
dealt with that
corroborate that.
already. I would suggest you look at our streams on that topic.
Parts of it are historical, and other
Parts
parts
of
have
it,
not
you-
been corroborated. But
Right.
I mean, how do you know we haven't found a history book that corroborates King Herod's massacre of infants?
Because we've looked at the ancient histories. They don't mention that.
Reese,
I mean, yeah, I'm just saying, just because Josephus left it off doesn't mean that it didn't happen either.
And
Yeah,
just
but you-
because
but
he
you-
included it does not mean it happened either.
you would have to question whether or not, if he's writing specifically about the atrocities King Herod committed, why he would leave that atrocity out. You would have to question that.
Because he doesn't want to make Jews look bad. He's a Jew. Why would he make Jews look bad?
But he's
If
writing
King-
about,
He's the historian.
about the atrocities of
Could
King
I-
Herod.
could I just,
if
just
King
one
Herod
quick
is a
reason,
Jew, if King Herod is a Jew and he's killing babies, why would he make his own king look bad? He doesn't want the Jews to look
Writing
bad.
a book called The Atrocities of King Herod. Imran, tell him.
could I just very
I mean, I'm
briefly-
talking about antiquities of this.
Sorry, I muted you, Reese. Go ahead, Imran. Imran's just going to make a point first.
I was going to make a point, but actually, I heard Nazam trying to make. So Nazam, if you
I actually wanted Imran, but yeah, I'll just say very quickly. As two examples just from the top of my head, with regards to how Matthew contradicts, for want of a better word, Mark's account. For example, the baptism of Jesus. You have in Mark's gospel, God saying to Jesus, "You are my son," but in Matthew's gospel, it's been changed to, "This is my son." So you have the word of God being changed in Matthew's gospel, if it's the word of God to begin with in Mark. And also in Matthew's gospel, you have the incident of the rich young ruler coming to Jesus, asking him the question, what must he do to be saved? And Jesus answers, "Why do you ask me about what is good?" Whereas that's the reference for that is Matthew chapter 19 verse 17, I believe. But if you compare that to Mark's account in Mark chapter 10 verse 17 and forward, Mark says, Jesus answers, "Why do you call me good? There is none good but God alone." Whereas in Matthew, Jesus answers by saying, "Why do you ask me about what is good?" So this is an example where Matthew changes the history in Mark's gospel in order to make Jesus appear different in his account.
Yeah, I mean, wait, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Imran, just to underline the point that I made, that why would Josephus write about King Herod? Why would he not write about King Herod? As Reese said, that Josephus wouldn't want to embarrass the king of the Jews when he's writing a book about the atrocities of King Herod.
I mean, the point I wanted to make, Reese, and it's really on the approach that you were using when you were saying that if it's not recorded, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Which I understand, why you would be led into that sort of reasoning, but then what you do is you open the door for anything to have happened. I mean, a blue rhinoceros could have landed on my house and flown away, but because it hasn't recorded anywhere, I could still say, look, that's a valid claim and you have to accept it. So when we're doing a historical
that's
approach,
fine.
I just want to finish my point, Reese, so you can reply, but let me just make my point. So what the approach that we're using is we're saying, this is what the narrative says. We've spoken a little bit about the narrative, and this is the history that we can use to try and corroborate the narrative. I'm glad you've said that the Bible is not a history book and that the central message is not a historical one, because that's really the point that we're making, and you seem to agree with that. You've gone along with the idea of oral tradition.
No. Parts of it are history and parts aren't.
Sure, I understand. I'm not saying that it's all ahistorical, but the fact is that we have to work out which bits are historical and which bits aren't. And that's really the important investigation that we're doing. Now, you mentioned that one of the reasons you believe in it is that that it's a coherent narrative between the different Gospels. You mentioned Mark and Matthew. Brother Nazam has given you a couple of examples of where the coherence is not the same, where Matthew is changing something specifically that Jesus would have said.
Yeah.
And the reason that's important is because you're talking about the accurate transmission of oral history. So if Matthew is changing some words of Mark that were allegedly said by Jesus, then what happens to your chain of transmission?
Why do you call me good, right?
Why do you ask?
That's the verse.
Yeah.
That's the verse you're talking
explain,
about.
That would be useful.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, you're talking about the verse where Jesus says, why, do you call me good? Only my Father in heaven is good. Yeah. That's fine. That's just like Matthew.
Yeah, it's no
changing
longer.
It, right?
Yeah.
Matthew is changing it because he wants us to understand God in this manner. It is a way of understanding obedience to God, which is different from how it is in Mark.
The reply that Jesus gives to the question about salvation doesn't make sense to me, because the man is asking about salvation and Jesus has come as the Messiah. But Jesus should welcome a question about what must he do to be saved. But whereas Jesus seems to be rebuking him by saying, why do you ask me about what is God? So the answer that Jesus gives in Matthew doesn't seem to make sense in the light of Jesus being God's Messiah.
Well, it's because Matthew wants us to understand this part of Jesus as well. Like Mark may have missed parts of who Jesus is.
Matthew wasn't there. You just said
no. I'm talking about copying from Mark. He's using Mark as a source.
Telling us Matthew wants us to understand Jesus, but Matthew doesn't understand Jesus. Matthew wasn't with Jesus.
Like you're saying that there's changes. You're saying.
No, yeah,
I'm saying
he changed an oral account, an oral tradition.
If I could just re-emphasize that point, Reese, so that you understand, so that it's clear. Apologies, I'm sure you understand already. Just so it's clear. The point that you've made, and you've made it quite sort of strongly, is that you believe that this is oral tradition being passed on. So it's being taught from one person is teaching another person oral tradition that they regard as being revelation, so they're recording it down. Now, the problem that we have now is, and Nazam's pointed out, there are examples of changes to the words that Jesus has said. And so then we're talking about a change in the words that would be part of the oral tradition.
Yeah.
Now, what that does, that puts into doubt the accurate transmission of the oral tradition to start with. I hope that's clear.
No, the author purposely changed it because the author wanted us to know about this part of Jesus Christ, his obedience to the Father of God.
Point I was making, though, Reese, because that was a point they made, and I made a further point. You're talking as if Matthew knew Jesus.
No, he looked at Mark. Okay, Matthew read Mark, and he was like, "Hey, Mark is missing that Jesus Christ is obedient to his Father."
But you said Mark was writing from Peter, so Mark would have some accurate account of what's going on. Matthew's never met Jesus, so how can you then say Matthew can understand what Jesus was saying?
Because we have 11 other apostles.
So
it's not just Peter. We have 11 other apostles that are also passing oral tradition down.
Right. So how does Matthew? So the oral tradition is different then. Okay. But how does Matthew know what Jesus was meaning by his words?
Because he had the oral traditions of all of the apostles that he was writing down into his book. He was like, okay, Matthew's missing the part of Jesus that obeys the Father.
Could I interject here? You said to us earlier that we know that Matthew didn't write Matthew because he doesn't say that in the gospel, that he was not an eyewitness because he doesn't say that himself, and that's logical. And what was the last point you just said? Can you repeat it one more time for us?
Okay, that Matthew, the author, not Matthew, maybe it was somebody else, but the author of Matthew was getting his sources from not just Mark, not just Peter, but from the other apostles.
Right, so let's pause there. Does he say that himself?
Does he say that in the gospel?
Yeah.
Not that I recall. I know Luke says that, but not in Matthew.
So Matthew doesn't say that, and you don't consider that to be the case. But when he also does not say that he was an eyewitness, you reject that as well. So it seems to me that when he says so in both cases it's absent. He doesn't say he's an eyewitness, and he doesn't say he got it from the other apostles. But for one of it, you're saying I agree, and the other you're saying you're disagreeing. Why do you come to that conclusion? What's the logic behind that?
Only logic is that he's getting and pooling from oral traditions of the 12 apostles, not just Mark and Peter.
How do you know it's from the 12 apostles when he himself has not said so?
You mean so he didn't say it specifically, so he didn't do it, is what you're saying?
That was your claim. You said that Matthew did not say he was an eyewitness, therefore he was not an eyewitness. I'm using the exact same logic. He does not say he got it from the other apostles, therefore he didn't. The exact same logic. Your logic.
It follows logically because we already know that Mark got it from Peter. We know that Luke in his own gospel says, I went around interviewing people and I got this information from them.
Don't worry, we're going to do it. Don't worry about
so we can assume that Matthew did a similar process.
SubhanAllah, I want to point out here that the Qur'an says that you follow nothing but assumption, and you've just qualified that point for us.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a logical. I think since the other ones do it, that Matthew would be similar. Yes,
but we don't know that they do. We do know what they claim. There's a difference between something being claimed and something being actualized in history. In this case, you seem to be saying to me it's more logical than illogical that he got it from a reliable source, but you don't know that. So if we take away the assumption, I can't grant you something that its primary evidence is an assumption. Can you perhaps tell us that you know with certainty, not an assumption, that he did get it from apostles?
I mean, you know, I haven't specifically looked at who wrote Matthew. I know more about the book of Mark. I mean, if I looked it up like right now, if I go on who wrote Matthew, I could find exactly how he got that information.
Reese, we're gonna have another stream. Don't worry, mate. Right? Watch this one. Watch the first one. And we'll let you back on. But do some research before you just jump on, and because you came on talking about the crucifixion, mate. You're like 4 streams behind.
That's a fact, though. We have corroborate. My point is that we have corroborating evidence.
Oh, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do for you, Reese. Because I'm so nice. Go and watch our streams on the crucifixion as well. Watch our Mark and watch Matthew, and come on next time, and let's see what you got.
Sure, man. The Talmud has the crucifixion. Tacitus has the crucifixion.
Just before you leave, just want to say thank you for coming on. I know it's not easy coming on with a panel full of people who are sort of not holding your perspective. And we appreciate your time, and it was a good discussion. And please come again, because we're going to be continuing these discussions.
And Reese, look me up on social media like Facebook. I like to continue these discussions with you, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure thing. Hold on. Here's my Discord. I'll go ahead and post it on your StreamYard.
No, put it on the private chat. So we can see from there.
Okay, I like to stay in touch. So,
thank you. Take
right on, guys. Yeah, no, great discussion.
I don't see you.
For having me.
Take care.
So that was absolutely amazing, wasn't it? It was. Go on, Brother Josh, give us your view of that, because he said a lot of gems in that discussion.
Well, I was listening most of the time because we had already addressed most of these points already. May Allah reward Firdaus for their generous donation. Let me just point that out. Everyone who donates helps the dawah, and it's not just donations. We need your doers as well. Don't forget D&D. So just quickly, I like Reese as an individual, and I was happy that he was willing to come on and provide some evidence for what he believed. That is always commendable, and he did so in a polite way. I noticed that Hamza let the lion out of the cage. He kept it in the corner in the cage. It's fine, which is good. And that's good. So we like pleasant, kind, mild-mannered individuals that are willing to explore the topic with us. But he seemed more to agree with what we were saying than to disagree. And the only point that he disagreed on was that Matthew must have gotten it from apostolic tradition. But the only reason he says that is because he's a Catholic, and they depend. The faith literally depends on apostolic succession. I want to point out as well, if he wasn't a Catholic, I may very well argue that he would not have raised the point of apostolic succession. And I noticed that he didn't cite any biblical historians or any of the church fathers that say that definitively we know that Matthew, who was not the disciple but still named Matthew, got it from church tradition. I mean, so I like him. I like his personality. The arguments were not robust, but we like when people at least attempt to be honest with us. I do like that he mentioned he had some assumptions. That was very good. I like that he said that the author of Matthew does not say he is Matthew or that he was an eyewitness. Therefore, you know what? It's logical to believe he was not that person. Fine, we accept those points. So I think he agreed on 99% of the things that we did say, and the 1% of things that we disagreed with, they're vague and they're not really essential.
The favorite thing I heard him say was the fact that the idea that the Gospels are historical is irrelevant.
I like that.
Subhanallah. Yeah,
I like that. These Christians should keep agreeing with us, man.
Can we get a Christian that disagrees, but in a good way?
I'm pretty sure Rafa's going to disagree.
We got Rafa, Merlin, Tony Pullis is back, and Double D.
Do these people not have real names?
I think DD was on before. Remember DD? He'd been on.
Put Tony Pullis on. Let's just see if I was right.
I think you're over.
I got to know now. But don't give him. We're not going to give him that much air. Let's just see.
Well, I think in the private chat he said, "Well done, Darren. Wink. Internet is playing up. Storm here." So I'm guessing you probably were.
Oh, that was right then. No need then. Just bring someone new on then. Someone.
Let's put Merlin. Merlin. No one called Merlin's been on, have they?
No,
I don't think so.
So we're trying to prioritize new Christians, just to give a variety of views, inshallah.
Yes.
Hello, Merlin.
Merlin, you're on.
He's unmuted. Can you hear us, Merlin?
That's a really bad magician, let me tell you.
Yeah. Magic disappearing act. So we have Rafa or Double D?
I'm crying because I don't know.
You're talking about Christians and internet, aren't you?
You know, if it's not the guy in Ghana, it's the whatever Christian we get. They always have guys, I gotta ask. We're all Muslims here. What is the secret? What is the secret internet company that we're all using that the Christians don't have access to? I got to know. I got
my
to know.
secret from Abbas. I don't know if I can give it out.
You know what? I got mine from Abbas as well.
So,
I got mine from Abbas as well, guys. What's going on?
Should we try DD? So he's got
DD. Sorry, I know Rafa's been waiting patiently. Should we let him on after then?
Oh, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but he does that to himself because he technically comes on every video.
Double D. Hello?
Is that DD? You're on.
Hello?
Hi there, DD.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, no, it's not working.
Okay. About the internet. See, we are calling from different locations. And
We're just joking, brother. Don't take it personally.
you guys laugh a lot. We are calling from a different location and sometimes different country, you know, and the internet providers there can be, you know, it might not be as better as yours over there. So that might be the case.
No problem.
Needs to be clarified.
Okay. Then I want to talk about the previous caller. I don't think he actually knows most of the things or study about most of the things he was saying. You know, and I'm very sure these are the kind of, you know, people you guys would like to communicate with, because this guy absolutely is ignorant about most of the things he says. And I know Ijaz would be happy to have such person on on the chat, on the live stream. Now,
well, it's a good thing you're here, brother DD, so you can set everyone's
okay,
straight.
Yeah, because we've let you on too, so I don't know what you're insinuating by that.
Okay.
So to be fair to him, he's not here to defend himself.
About the history about Herod and about Matthew recording about the killing of the babies and Joseph are not recording it down. Yeah, it doesn't mean when someone is writing down history, there is an intention behind, there's a bias behind it. You understand? So in a way, I agree with you guys, but not totally. If Josephus didn't record it, the story about the killing of the babies, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean that event did not occur. But if you're arguing the fact that I don't know, the Hamza, I want to ask this question: are you saying that this event didn't happen?
I'm saying the author says things in that historical narrative using the Old Testament out of context to support him, which is then contradicted by
using what? Using what? Please repeat yourself.
Sorry.
Repeat yourself. I didn't get using what.
Okay. The story goes that King Herod orders the killing of the babies. Yeah, between the
by Matthew. In the Gospel of Matthew, right?
Yes, 2 years and younger. Yeah, basically the baby's born in the last 2 years in Bethlehem and the surrounding areas. Yeah. Okay. Joseph and Mary flee to Egypt to escape this persecution. Yeah.
Okay.
And then they return after King Herod dies. And that's the story. Now there's a few prophecies that are quoted by the author of Matthew, which do not apply to this scenario. They apply to something completely different, completely taken out of context. Okay. And then we have so the question needs to be asked: did this happen in history or not? Because no one else records it. Only Matthew records it. Yeah. So the question we ask is, did this happen in history? Well, we just so happen to have a man in history called Flavius Josephus. And this was a man who was writing about all the horrible things King Herod did. Now, I'm pretty sure you would agree, ordering the killing of all babies between 2 and below in Bethlehem and all surrounding villages would be classed as an atrocity. So the question is to ask, if this happened in history, why was it not recorded? That's the question.
Okay. First of all, I want to ask a question. Do you believe does Josephus record that Jesus died on the cross?
That's nothing to do with what I just said.
Wait, no, I want to follow a train of thought here.
No need to.
Did he record it down? Did he record it down?
Just address what I said.
You are using Josephus as a criteria to judge this history, this event.
Listen, we've done a whole stream on the crucifixion. I'm not going to go through it again with you.
You are using using Josephus as a criteria to judge this event.
No, I'm just saying it's just so happens when King Herod, it was a man, a Jewish historian, writing about all the horrible things King Herod did.
Okay.
Yeah, all the things he did.
And I hear you.
Family.
And I hear you loud and clear.
So the question
now,
asked,
the question is that why didn't he record this down? Now, and I'm now asking you, are you using Josephus as a criteria or
I'm just asking you a simple question.
Then there is no need of communication about it. That means it happens, and he might have he not recording it down doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Because if you want to use Josephus as a criteria, that means we have to go and talk about crucifixion.
You're going to cost yourself if you go to crucifixion again.
1 second.
No, we have to, because
Didi, 1 second.
You are okay.
Didi, if you can hear me. So the title of the stream is The Historicity of the Gospel of Matthew, right? And so by choosing to come on, then you should be able to argue points which you believe from the Gospel of Matthew are historical in terms of the historicity of those events. If you don't have an event that you think can be demonstrated historically, then it does not make sense to argue against a point which you don't believe in the first place. So is there a point at which you think in the Gospel of Matthew there is something historical that you want to present to us?
This is just one issue in the Gospel of Matthew we are talking about, the killing of the babies below 2 years. You understand? All I want is consistency.
Okay, you sound just like James White.
Wait now, you don't allow me. No, consistency. Because you see, what makes me get tired of argument about religion is because on the both sides, even Christian, they do this too. Inconsistency. The Muslim, so I don't even bother to go into argument about religion because as if it's a double standard. Both sides use double standard, and I'm already getting tired. If you are going to mention Josephus, that means we have to be consistent. But once we are out of Josephus in the history of killing of babies, then I'm already tired of the whole communication. So I don't think I can even, because you see the previous stream I was trying to like, because there was an issue you raised about Mark and I don't, I've forgotten. I jotted it down somewhere. I was about coming in to discuss it, but somehow internet, like we all said internet, because I'm in a different country, a different continent. You understand? So I wasn't able to come in. I would just say I don't think the argument, because we are going to keep on going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I am not like a kind of very religious kind of person. I'm not very religious. You understand? But I'm a Christian by birth. I'm a Christian by birth. But I am more exposed to Islam in a way. Okay. I'm more exposed to Islam. But I just me being a Christian by birth, I will have Christian, norms and all those things. So I still go with, one of my issue is with Christianity is some argument. I won't bring it up here. But my major issue with Islam is the crucifixion. That is a big history that was missed in the Islamic literature. It's a big fact. No professor have ever disputed that fact. They miss it. So my issue now, let's go to the Gospel of Matthew. If Hamza, you don't want to say that you are using Josephus as a criteria in judging that particular event, then I don't have, because I'll keep on going forward, and you bring up another topic. All right. I will look out for the history, your criteria. If your criteria is not consistent, listen to me. Be a waste of time.
Didi, just listen to me, please. Okay, I understand what you want to jump on. Just do me this favor. Go to our stream on the crucifixion and look how we spoke about Josephus. All right, then you'll understand our position, because you don't even understand our position because I'm not presenting it. All right, then I think do that. Then I want you to message us on EFDawah, and we're going to have a conversation. All right.
Okay.
Inshallah. Just do that. Just that, please.
Good.
All right, my man. Take care. Yeah.
No problem.
Cool. Thank you.
No worries.
So I just really wanted to, because the point that Didi seemed to be making is that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. He was following this sort of mindset, but there's a problem with this. This is not always true. It has a limit, and the limit is it's unless you expect some evidence to be present. So in a book that's talking about the atrocities of Herod, written by a historian allegedly of the time, you'd accept him to write about the killing or the massacre of babies, that as something that Herod commanded, because the book is about this topic. So it's a strange argument that he was presenting, and I was a bit disappointed because he put down Reese, who was actually a very nice gentleman from earlier on, saying he wasn't learned, etc., and then went on to say that he himself was not a religious Christian, and it's just sort of unnecessary, because obviously he felt that Reese didn't do very well. And it's not a nice way of doing it. So
I didn't think, with no disrespect to Didi, but I didn't think he had anything new to what Reese didn't say already.
Yeah.
And also this point about absence of evidence is not evidence for its absence. It's not just that there's no evidence outside of Matthew's gospel for this massacre, but the massacre also contradicts Luke's version of the same story.
Absolutely,
of the nativity story. If one reads both, one will understand what I mean.
We'll compare them anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Alhamdulillah.
I think one of
oh God. Ring on the Rafa. Drum roll, please. Hey.
Rafael, nice to speak to you again.
Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Rafael.
Yes, I was waiting patiently. For sure, for Jesus Christ, I will wait patiently. So don't worry. Okay, I wanted to address a few points that you made about the historicity of Matthew. So how we get that Matthew wrote Matthew. The second point I want to make is about the lineage of Jesus Christ. So I disagree that what you said, Mary is not from Levi, although it is implied, but I'll tell you why. And also tell you why Matthew seems to have copied from Mark. So the first point I want to make is this. As I say, we rely on the earliest writings of our church fathers, so Papias, so we are aware of that. But Papias is the one who said he saw the people like John. So Papias was the early one, very early, which means he lived the end of the 1st century to the 2nd century. So Papias saying that Matthew wrote, so I will just read quickly. Matthew put together the oracle of the Lord in Hebrew language, and each interpreted as best as they could. So what I understand from that, I understand from that is that initially Matthew wrote in Hebrew, okay? And this has been confirmed by many church fathers. I think Origen talked about it. Irenaeus talked about it also. Now, it doesn't mean that Matthew wrote only in Hebrew, okay? But it could also mean that in the early Christian community, you have people called the Hellenists. So Hellenists were Hebrew who live in the Greek world. So they were very fluent in Greek, and also they have a Hebrew culture. So the same as today, you have many Hebrew who live, let's say, in London. They are actually perfectly bilingual. So people who wrote Matthew and the author of Matthew. So we, based on the what Papier said, the author is Matthew. Now the question comes to the Greek Matthew that we have, who is the scribe. And to be fair with you, in Christian history, we didn't actually we didn't actually record it, described, and that's why today we have textual criticism.
Can I ask you a question, Rafa?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you believe the author of Matthew was a disciple of Jesus?
Yes, it's actually Matthew. It's actually Matthew, the tax collector.
So now it's two Christians saying he was, two Christians are saying no, three now.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So that's what I'm explaining.
So you believe the author of Matthew is a disciple of Jesus,
yes.
writing down
so
what he
in a sense that is the author, but the person who actually wrote the Greek, I cannot. I don't know his name. Okay. Some people say
Matthew. No, we're talking about the original. So you're saying
yeah.
So the author, just so we can understand now,
yeah.
You believe is the talking disciple of Jesus.
Yes,
Matthew,
yes, and the reason why it seems to have copied from Mark. Don't forget, Mark was in Hebrew, so Mark and Peter. So
Mark
when they consider
Mark was in Hebrew.
Yes, it was Hebrew. So
that's coming. Says it was in Greek. Like Papier says, he interpreted what Peter said and wrote in Greek.
Yes, he wrote in Greek doesn't mean that it was Greek. So as I said, Mark.
Why do you believe Mark was in Hebrew?
Because Mark is the one who is referenced in the book of Acts, based on most of the testimony of the church fathers. So Mark is the one who referenced the book of Acts. John Mark is the one who's referenced there. Right. So that's why he's a Hebrew by culture. Now, the reason why Matthew copy from him, so don't forget everything that happened in the first century, we Christians would consider that actually we have no issue because the apostles were all alive and the oral tradition was actually very well alive. So the fact that Matthew copied from Mark, we saw last time that Peter may have been killed under Nero based on the testimony of our church fathers. So and his gospel was actually incomplete, okay, based on what they assume. So Matthew has to do a gospel, but Matthew is not going to discard what already exists in history, which means the text from Mark. So Matthew is going to take this as a testimony of Peter. Why? Because when you read the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew is called later in I think it's Matthew 9, chapter 9. That's where Matthew is called, which means Jesus have done many things before where Matthew was not there. And there are three key people among the disciples of Jesus Christ. Three key people who are aware of most of the things that Jesus did: Peter, John Zebedee, and James of Zebedee. Not the James that is in the book of Acts, but the James of Zebedee, who died very early. So the only one that is actually who knew many things about the teaching of Jesus Christ more than other apostles were either Peter or John. Okay. Now, so Matthew taking what was like the testimony of Peter and compiling this in Hebrew. Okay, I don't see any issue with that if that's happened in the first century, as it said from by our church fathers.
But Mark was compiled in Greek, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was written in Greek.
But the author was Hebrew. Why did he write in Greek?
But because, as I said, the Hellenists, you have the Christian
No, why did
community.
Mark write in Greek? I don't understand. Why
He
did
wrote
Mark-
in Greek so that it's spread among the non-Jew. So people who read Greek. That's why I wrote in Greek.
And then Matthew, you're saying Matthew then translated it into Hebrew?
Yes. So Matthew, so he has to take just one second.
Rafael, just 1 second. You confused me. You said that Mark wrote for the non-Jews in Greek, right?
Yes, yes.
But there was no gospel besides his gospel. Wouldn't he write to convince the Jews first?
No, it depends. So first of all, the gospel was preached orally, right? It was preached orally until at one point when Peter was there was this persecution. So Mark wrote in Greek, and because that's where they were preaching. But that gospel that Mark wrote went around and was among the apostle, and they noticed that there was something missing, so they had to write a complete one. But you cannot discard what is supposed to be the testimony of Peter.
No, you're going forward, and I'm trying to bring you back, right?
Okay.
If Mark is writing a gospel, what at that point the Jews aren't accepting Christianity? Why would he write his gospel for non-Jews when they're trying to preach to the Jews first? Wouldn't he write it in Hebrew to the Jews?
Because in an early Christian community, you have the Hellenists. You have some of them who were actually very well versed in Greek and Hebrew, and you have some who knew a little bit of Greek. So you need to write also for the community who didn't speak actually Hebrew. Okay, and in fact there were more and more non-Hebrew coming into the community of Christians. So it's the same as like me today writing in English. Okay, this is a language that many people speak. So that's why it was written in Greek. But as I say, Matthew has to take that information that exists because Peter was no longer there, and the testimony of Peter is actually reliable. And Matthew has to take that and wrote in Hebrew.
All right, so 1 second here. So Matthew is trying to solve a problem that Mark created by not writing the gospel in Hebrew in the first place.
No, it's not a problem that created. So, let's say they're all preaching, and at one point someone decided to start writing. So it's happened that Mark was one of the first who started writing, and the persecution became very harsh, and Peter died at that time under Nero. So they have to continue writing, but Matthew has to write also for in Hebrew for the Hebrew speakers based on what.
But you've created a problem. You've created a problem where Mark sits down and he's like, you know what, guys, I really want to spread this message among the Jews because that's who Jesus came to preach to. But let me forget that. Let me write it in Greek. Forget everyone else. And then Matthew comes later and has to be like, Mark, what did you do? You should have written this in Hebrew first. And then Matthew sits down, writes it in in Hebrew. And then someone takes his gospel and translates it into Greek because Mark's gospel was incomplete. So this entire problem begins with Mark writing in the wrong language and being incomplete.
No, I think your assumptions are wrong. As I said,
I've just used your words. If my assumptions are wrong,
your assumptions are wrong. But as I said, they are all preaching orally. That's we're talking about the first century until Mark put it down in writing. Okay, and that's how. Later, when Peter died because of persecution, Matthew decided to write in Hebrew for the Hebrew speakers. So he has to take the testimony of Peter as reference because he cannot discard what Peter said. He was not there from the beginning of the preaching of Jesus. So then that's why you see that people like Pierre said. Sorry, repeat again.
Right. So Rafa, I'm enjoying this conversation because of all the convoluted ways you've got to work this through to come to your position, right? So let's make it clear and let's do it step by step, right? Yeah. Now, this stream is on the Gospel of Matthew. I realize that you want to speak on Mark, but I think we did have you on.
Because of the question asked, in fact, that's why I have to answer that.
So I think you were referencing the church fathers in the form of Papias, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
right?
Yes. Yeah.
So here is the question. Then, do you fully believe that Matthew wrote his gospel initially in Hebrew?
That's what I think, yes.
Okay, but we have manuscripts from the 2nd century which are not in Hebrew. And they don't seem to be based on a Hebrew edition in the first place. So how do you come to the conclusion historically that Matthew first wrote it in Hebrew without evidence of that?
Okay, there are many. As I say, I quoted Papias. I think I can
That's
even
one
read.
person.
Yes,
In
I
the
can read
second century,
Origin. Origin will say the
late
same thing.
2nd century. So
Yeah.
you got like a 50, 60-year gap between them.
And also, I think Irenaeus will say the same thing.
In the year 185, he's actually citing Papias when he does that. Yeah.
Okay. So and you have this, and you know, before I was listening to the first one, the Hebrews are like he talked about the Shem Tov Matthew. Okay, so there is a scholar. I think I met him once, who highlighted.
Hold up. We're going with the historical testimony first, right?
Absolutely.
So you've mentioned one person in the early 1st century, in the early 2nd century, and two people using the same source from the late 2nd century.
Yeah,
so
but,
you
but
have
the
no
quality,
one.
The quality of the source is important, right?
Well, we know that Papias was not a reliable source according to Eusebius. He believed many myths and wonderful things. So you get where I'm going with.
Yeah, I see what you're going. But I'm saying, as let's say, is one of the few one who wrote at that time. You know, we cannot. So let's say other people are written, we don't have them. They're writing.
But I'll tell you this, Rafa. Do you know who Jimmy Savile is?
No, I'm not an historian. Tell me.
Okay, well, you don't want to know about Jimmy Savile, but the point is, if Jimmy Savile told me X child was a good child, I would be worried that he knew that child in the first place. The same thing with Papias. That Papias has issues and he's gullible according to Eusebius does not make him important. So just because he's the first to survive in terms of his work, they don't actually survive. They only come from the 4th century, technically speaking. But just because his work survives through Eusebius does not make it important, necessary, or a primary means of evidence. It just means what has survived.
Yeah, but okay, but no church fathers, whether in the time of Clement or all these people, no church father dispute what he said. So it's not because, yes, they may have disagreed with some of this theology, in fact, and that's what you say. Eusebius have disagreed with some of this theology, but it doesn't mean that what he says was disputed in terms of Matthew is the author of the gospel.
Hold on there. Okay. So these people that are writing in the late 2nd century have allegedly taken information from the person who is in the early 2nd century.
There is another one.
It does not mean that what they've based their tradition on. One second. Let me just finish the point. I know Tertullian mentions it.
Ijaz is the one that also references Matthew.
Hegesippus.
Yeah, so it's also the one in the early 2nd century. Okay, is early
1st, 2nd century.
No, early 2nd century.
Okay. And what is your source for that?
But the source is Eusebius, because his writing disappeared. So Eusebius, being an historian of the church, had these writings with him, and today we don't have it.
One second. So your argument seems to be, this is what the church believed, therefore it is true, as opposed to these are the evidence that the church fathers mentioned. So do you know what a telephone game is? You know, X says something to Y, Y says something to Z. It doesn't always make it true. So we're not asking you to tell us what the church fathers say. That's one potential form of evidence, but that's your only evidence. Do you have something else which lends credibility to what you are saying?
As I said, the only thing we have as the testimonies of the church fathers, so what they wrote, and also the church historian. And this is what is written. We can have anything can be oral tradition. Why they believe that? Why let's say Eusebius, Irenaeus believed that. We don't have all the detail. He didn't write why he believes that. He just said that's what everyone believes. And so we don't have a record of oral history. We have a record of people who wrote it in the first place, and that's the only reference we have. Okay, but so that's Rafael, what I can say about this.
Let me ask you a question. Yeah, you and I disagree on a point right now. Yeah. And 100 years from now, the record of this conversation are only my words. Would you agree that my point of view is the best point of view?
You need to have a point of view which is corroborated
right?
by other people,
and
right?
You accept. Hold on, one sec. And then 100 years after my record survived, someone else comes and quotes my record from 100 years before. So what happens is, your point of view doesn't survive, but it existed at one point. And the point stands now. Just because my view survived does not mean that you never disagreed. It just so happens that that's the only thing which survived.
I think what you're saying, you forget that the early Christian community was a community. and that's why they rejected those who were not Orthodox. Okay, those who believe some strength in, they rejected them because it was actually a community. So if you're talking about things that are out of the orthodoxy, which the key people have agreed with, so it doesn't matter.
Hold on. So they reject people who are non-Orthodox. Did they reject or did they accept Papias?
But they accepted Papias.
But he believed things which are heretical, yeah?
No, I'm not talking about heresy in this sense. Papias is the one who was acquainted with the apostle John and so on. That's what he said. Which means,
to be clear, he doesn't define which John he knew. That's your interpretation of that. He points out that he heard from John. He doesn't specify which one. I want to point that out. Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, the book written by Richard Borkham, explains that issue completely. It just seems that you've chosen to interpret that one piece of data to refer to the disciple John. I don't think that's the case.
No problem. But it is known that Papias was the one who he talked about Aristion and the presbyter at least. Okay, the presbyter Aristion. Okay, so let me summarize my point, and then I have other point I wanted to address. But let me summarize my point. My point is that yes, Matthew took the Gospel of Mark as reference to write his Gospel in Hebrew, and people copied his Gospel in Hebrew into Greek. And the copy we have today are the copies in Greek. Now, as I say, the Christians, they were actually very not good of recording the scribes, okay, and that we know, that's the facts. That's why we have textual criticism. So yes, and that's what I think about, based on the facts of history. That's what I think happened with the Gospel of Matthew. Okay, that's my stand on that. Okay,
one second, Rafael. 1 second, Rafael, just quickly on that point. If the evidence of the textual critics matter to you, there is consensus that the Gospel of Matthew was composed in Greek, never in Hebrew.
Okay, I'll tell you the issue with that. Most of the people who know Greek, most of them don't know Hebrew. That's why I was talking about the Hebrew speaker. Because let's say if you go in the let me finish my point. You are laughing. Let's say the Hebrew Matthew that was talked about. Let me finish the point. Important points.
Rafael, you got to work with me, right? You say we need to use the evidence of the textual critics. And then you say, when I bring up a point that the textual critics disagree with you on, those guys just don't know Hebrew, that's right. But
I'll tell you
many of them do.
I say that.
But many of them do. And 1 second, Rafael. The scholarly consensus among textual critics that know both Hebrew and Greek is that, you guess what? Matthew was not composed in Hebrew, but firmly in Greek. Could you perhaps name me?
What is the reason for that?
Because when you convert the Volage text back into Hebrew, the format of the text does not follow that it was initially composed in Hebrew.
Okay. You have also other people, Hebrew speakers, in fact, who say the contrary. And you know the Gospel of the Gospel that we talked about a few minutes ago. That Gospel, in fact, in Hebrew, the Hebrew Matthew, Shem Tov. Okay, there's a book that was written about it, okay, and proving that this was actually initially in Hebrew, using the Hebrew phraseology and so on. So it's both ways.
Rafa, have you been watching the stream? You've seen the Hebrew Israelite come on. You've seen him with his Wikipedia, and you've seen the response to it, and now you're just bringing the same argument again.
No, I can give you the book written by
1 second.
By that person,
Rafa,
if you want.
Rafa, does Shem Tov include Matthew 28:19?
Okay, so let me answer this. The Shem Tov. No. Let's. You know what? I know a little bit about this. Okay, the Shem Tov, for sure. The criticism about the Shem Tov is that it was written by Hebrew just to attack Christianity, because it was about the debate between Christian and Jews. Okay, that's the criticism. But that text came from earlier than the century where there was this kind of debate. Okay, and if you read Jerome,
again, mate. Sorry. Yeah. Did you not see Daniel?
Which Daniel?
Daniel, who was on our stream first.
The Black Hebrew Israelite.
The Black Hebrew Israelite.
Okay, before I'll give my last point and I'll go to the next point.
No.
I saw him.
You saw him. Did you listen to him?
A little bit, but not too much. So he was arguing the Hebrew equivalence between the Matthew.
He was arguing what you're arguing.
No, this is the second point, the side point I'm trying to make. My point was that
what I'm saying to you is, Rafa, we've dealt with this argument, mate. We don't need to go repeat the same argument.
I don't think so. Okay, but anyway, let's leave it as is. Okay, you have my opinion about the gospel.
But Rafa, just please answer the question: did Shem Tov include Matthew 28:19 in his edition?
Probably not. I don't. No. I have not studied the Shem Tov in detail.
So I want to point out, if you are saying that represents the original, then that verse.
I did not say.
One sec.
I did not say that. If you're saying that,
Rafael, let me finish. Right. If you're saying that edition potentially shows you that the Matthew was originally composed in Hebrew, keep in mind, like you said, it must go back earlier, and if it does, it excludes Matthew 28:19. So the Great Commission, where Jesus says, "Go out in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, and convert the peoples of the world." Guess what? That's out of the equation now.
Yeah, in fact, there were three types of Matthew that was talked about. The Matthew according to the Ebionite, the Nazarene. So there were many copies of Matthew, and no one actually, in terms of the preservation of the Hebrew Matthew, I'm not here to talk about this, because I don't think it is either preserved. I know that it existed. Okay, but how was it preserved? I don't know.
How do you know which one is historical then, if there's different versions?
I'm not, as I said, in terms of the preservation of the Hebrew Matthew, I'm not arguing about this, because this is a gospel that were among the Jews, and some of them, and we don't know how this was preserved and how it was passed on. So I'm not arguing for that. I'm just saying that initially Matthew wrote in Hebrew. That's what I'm saying. And I say, if you listen to Nehemiah Gordon, he explained why it is rational. I think he's actually someone who is a scholar of Hebrew. He can tell you exactly why. So okay, that's my point, and I think we can go to the next point I wanted to make, if you don't mind. Yes. So the other point I wanted to make.
One sec, Rafa. I think we have other people waiting. Yeah. We've given you
can I make one thing?
Yes, go ahead.
Just Rafael. You've spoken for quite some time, so if you appreciate, we won't.
No problem.
Leave your point for another moment. But you said something a little bit interesting. I just want to know. So you said that because what we have in terms of textually is the earliest manuscript we can refer to as a Greek Matthew. We don't have access to a Hebrew Matthew. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah. In fact, we don't know if the Hebrew Matthew that the church fathers like Jerome and others reference is actually the initial Hebrew, because we don't have because this were among the let's say the European and so on, the Greek speakers.
Referring to the Greek manuscripts, that this was written down by later people as a translation of that original Greek that you refer to. So you don't know who wrote the Greek manuscripts that we have, and initially. You don't know who wrote them at this moment. You said, I don't know his name, who wrote it.
Yeah, we don't usually know the name of the scribe, but the author, we know the name of the authors. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So really we don't disagree. So what we're saying is that the Matthew that you have, which is the Greek Matthew, because we have no other Matthew that we can refer to, is not written by the disciple whose name is attributed to. And you've essentially said that in your statements that you've made. But you keep referring to a Hebrew Matthew, and then you've said something really interesting. There were 3 different versions available.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're not sure which one do we have? Yeah, historical.
Yeah, historical. Yeah.
So then I'm surprised that you raised Shem Tov's 14th century gospel that doesn't contain the Great Commission as some sort of evidence of pointing to an earlier. Now, because we made the same point already, but I'm just going to reiterate where. If Shem Tov copied from an earlier Hebrew manuscript, his gospel, this was in the 14th century, only 600 years ago.
Yeah,
that means it was available for 1400 years.
I think Jerome quoted, and also
but he wrote it just 600 years ago, so you don't have to go as far back as Jerome.
No,
just 600 years ago, it was available.
No, people refer.
There's no evidence of that anywhere.
Yeah, because this was not actually in the line of the Greek speakers in of the church. I think that's why I think this Hebrew preservation was somehow not really considered. Okay, And that's my opinion, because it was not actually, many people didn't speak Hebrew, so it was like, okay, that's a text. Okay, what do we do with that? And that's what I think happened here.
Rafael, think about what you're saying. You're saying that somebody had access to the original Hebrew manuscript of Matthew. They had it, and they didn't consider it worth keeping.
No, I think it remained among some of the Hebrew at that time. Now, where did, as you know, there was a lot of in history between the Hebrew speakers in Christianity and the Greek speakers. So there was some tension that we cannot hide it. At one point, when the gospel became more European, there was some tension because they were just, okay, they are speaking Hebrew, okay, fine. And that's what I think. And when this gospel appeared sometime, I don't know, which century, was it the 4th century?
Rafael, we really appreciate your time.
I have an important point I want to make.
One second, Rafa, just so I can establish it. So basically, you've argued against all the other Christians, saying that Matthew is the author, was a walking, talking disciple of Jesus. That's the first thing you did.
Yeah.
You then appealed to a later manuscript of Matthew, this 13th, 14th century one, which doesn't have the Great Commission, and then you say there's 3 different versions of Matthew. Now, we're trying to understand. We're trying to understand now if this is historical, because you don't even know which one is supposed to be the right one. You get me? What happened to the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit? Anyway, that's wrong. I shouldn't bring theology into it. I shouldn't bring theology because this is just loads of men.
Maybe you didn't catch all my point, Hamza.
No. I'm just. Okay.
Right. And also, by the way, we're speaking about the Matthew that's in the in the New Testament. This part of the 66 or 73 books. We're not speaking about another Matthew that existed in history, but the Matthew that we do have in the canon of the Bible.
That's fine. Yeah. And I agree. My argument about the Shem Tov was simply to say that it's more probable the original was written in Hebrew. That's why I went there. So
well, what's your next point? What's your most important point?
I think we've given Rafa a good run for his money. Thank you very much, Rafa, for your time.
No problem.
And we'll speak again.
Thank you, Rafael. Take care.
Take care. All the best.
Thanks a lot, Rafa.
Because you don't want the second point?
I think we gave you a long time there, so
maybe
please feel free to come back in another time.
Let him hang in the back chat in case because Sam's not going to last long.
We wanted to just give other people a chance. And this is the feeling I have is that we have more streams of Matthew to come, so don't be worried.
Yeah. Straight. Right.
All right. So we only have Sam waiting now.
Okay, Sam.
Oh, Tony.
So
it's interesting.
Sorry,
yeah,
Imran.
You got it right, Tony Pulis, didn't you? It wasn't to try and hide. I just thought that'd be funny. You're right, guys.
Not too bad. How are you doing, Sam?
Yeah, not too bad. Internet's a bit up and down because it's a little bit. Weather's not great. I just wanted to ask: is you've been doing obviously historical discussion, historical criteria. You were on about, there was one dude on the stream who was on about oral tradition. And do you see that as a worthy type of criteria? Because obviously, I think it's fair to say that within your faith, oral tradition is a big thing as well. Is that a fair point?
I don't know who that was to, but you're really comparing apples and oranges, and
just any of you. I'm not too bothered.
I'm going to try it. So, just very briefly. So, you're really comparing apples and oranges. I think we're going to come on to the Quran specifically, with other streams coming up about this. But just sort of, because you've asked, that's the only question you've asked at the moment. We have an existent oral tradition. You have one that may have been there, but there's nothing exists about it before. So there's nothing to refer to or to even check. We had a brother earlier on, Reese, who was talking about how Mark was changed by Matthew.
Yeah, it was the one I was referring to.
Yeah, so he was saying it was changed by Matthew. So what that shows to me when I think about it is that the oral tradition itself was being amended from one gospel written down to another gospel written down. So if that's a transmission you're talking about, then obviously it's not a preservation. It's just a passing on of meanings, and they're adjusted to whatever the person's agenda may have been. So Matthew tries to do a lot of removal, embarrassing things, etc., which we're going to mention in more detail. And so that's a problem. The oral tradition, even being described at the moment, is not one of preserving the words as Jesus said them. but actually just somebody's writing something, taking some of the information before and adding things they think that they can add in afterwards, which doesn't really count. So we have a different perspective on this, and it's a completely different thing. So apples and oranges, but we'll definitely come on to that when we do our streams on the Quranic preservation, because we're not just doing this to attack Christianity. We're looking at the historicity of the gospel narratives.
Not saying you were, mate.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just explaining. And we'll be doing a similar thing with the Quran, just to sort of put this sort of idea to bed.
Was there a point to your question?
So, just in terms of because obviously this was meant to be historical. In terms of, so would you see that as a valid historical criteria? I know Imran's already made his point about apples and oranges. Fair enough, but like, do you see that as a valid historical criteria or oral tradition?
So, are you saying, do we accept that the idea that history could be reported verbally? Yeah, we've no issue with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like what the brother brought forward earlier when he was referencing the oral tradition, was that not valid?
No, no, it wasn't.
Look, the doctor said it to you.
Let me just say the point. So the point that I made right at the beginning, Sam, was extant tradition. So it exists now. So the Muslims have a tradition of oral tradition that is still in existence now. Do you understand? So we can actually look at it and refer to it, and even now you can be part of that tradition if you learn from the right people and you get the we call it the chain or the Ijaz for this. The Christians don't have this. They stopped let's take the idea that this was actually happening, but they stopped the oral tradition as soon as things were written down, which you say is very, very early as Christians. And that means then, therefore, there is no way of checking or verifying that. The only way we have to verify what was said or written is to look at the documents that we have to hand, and that's what we're doing. We're checking the historicity of the documents. Brother Ijaz has a point.
Just quickly, we know who the people in the chain are. We can identify them. When the Christians have come on, generally we don't know which John was John. Was it John of Patmos, John of the son of Zebedee, or was it John the disciple of Jesus?
Yep.
Right. So one of the things is, if you are going to have a successive oral tradition, you kind of need to know who the people in the chain are, because who the people are is just as important as the information they transmit. In this case, like we just had come on. One guy said Matthew wrote Matthew, and the other guys were like, no. Matthew.
Can you go back a bit? Can you go back a bit, Ijaz? You broke up a bit there.
Okay, no problem. Tony, I guess I'll use you by your misnomer right now.
No. You could say Sam. It's fine.
I don't like using the name Sam. It conjures bad memory of someone abusing his wife. So let's be clear here. And I just realized that Hamza just caught that. A couple of seconds behind me, so that's what I'm going to say. Yeah. Right. So you need to know who the people in the chain are if you're going to appeal to that oral tradition. Yeah. One of the things with the Christian version of the oral tradition is that you don't have successive identities in that chain being transmitted. And so now almost every Christian that comes along says, oh, we have oral tradition. Okay, great. Give me some people who narrated from that oral tradition. No names. And then when we come down to the nitty-gritty details, we see Christians come on the stream. We don't know which John Papias was referring to. We don't know which John Polycarp likely met. We don't know which Matthew actually wrote Matthew. I just saw another Christian in the chat saying that guy who came on and spoke about John Mark and Acts has no training because John Mark isn't Mark. So the Christians themselves seem to dispute each identity of the person in that chain, that supposed chain. So the fact that you have the chain being less important than the information they transmit when they should really be equal, hand in hand, then we cannot trust the information as reliable. At least on those. Yeah.
So is that all right, Sam?
Does anyone else want to say anything just before? Just don't want to interrupt anyone.
It's okay. It's nice to speak to you, Sam.
Cool. No, it's nice. No, I hope you guys are doing fine. No,
thanks for coming on, Sam.
If you like, the whole bit that's right. When you said obviously Christians disagree with each other, I kind of personally in terms of on a religious sense and a general religious sense, I don't really see the issue in that too much, because at the end of the day, in all religious faiths, you're always going to have different interpretations of the information. Just saying, so in an Islamic sense, Sunni and Shia is a classic example. Say Christianity would be Catholicism and Protestantism.
Sam,
is that a fair point to make?
No, it's nonsense. Goodbye.
Okay, that was.
Okay.
Honestly, please. Really?
That's everybody. God, well, Rafa's still waiting, actually.
Well, yeah, let's give him the opportunity.
Let me get
Okay,
Go on, Rafa.
You are a patient man.
I'm patient because I work for God. So anyway, the other point I want you to make, I have many points, but I'm sure I cannot cover all of them. So you talk about the lineage of Mary, and you say Mary is from Levi. In fact, there is no evidence for that. I can say definitely that Mary, mother, is in the lineage of Aaron. That's for sure. So I will agree that Mary is the daughter of Aaron, but not the sister of Aaron. Okay.
Was Aaron from Levi?
The Levi.
Was Aaron from the Levi tribe?
But it was a priest. It was the first priest.
Yeah, was he from the tribe of Levi?
If you go to the lineage of the priest, the first priest is Aaron.
Was Aaron? It's a simple question, man. 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah.
Was Aaron from the tribe of Levi?
No, it's before Levi.
He's before Levi.
Yeah. But as I said, this is the lineage of the priest. The lineage of the priest goes to Levi.
How can it be before Levi?
Aaron is Aaron is the.
You do know Aaron came.
Okay, sorry, I'm mixing here. So okay, when you say Jacob, okay, Jacob son to Levi. Okay.
Jacob. All right, Jacob is the father of the 12 tribes, and one of the tribes is Levi.
Yes.
Do you believe that Aaron was from the tribe of Levi?
Okay, so I'm trying. You are mixing me here. So in Moses,
you're mixing yourself.
I'm asking you a simple question. Aaron, was he from the tribe of Levi?
Aaron from the tribe of Levi.
Was he?
So I'm trying to figure out who is. So give me 1 second, okay? So Moses. Okay, Moses is after.
I'm going bald. I'm turning gray.
Yeah. Okay. So Moses is before, in the time of Aaron. Okay, and then when you go to the descendant of
Rafa.
Yeah.
What was the tribe of Moses?
Was it the tribe of Judah?
Not Moses.
Okay.
Moses was a Levite.
Moses was among the Israelites coming from. So above Moses you have Joseph. Okay.
Right. Listen.
So which means
Rafael.
Moses is from Levi. So Moses after Moses you have Aaron, and then you go down.
No. What tribe was Moses? What tribe was Moses?
It was certainly Levi. Why not?
Right. So Levi, and Aaron was Moses' brother. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
So what tribe is Aaron from?
Levi.
Alhamdulillah. And you just connected Mary to Aaron, yeah?
Yeah.
So what tribe is Mary from?
Okay. The reason why I'm hesitating because I was trying to figure out who was first, Moses and Aaron. Okay, now let me explain my point.
Rafa. Yeah. Listen, please. You don't need to see who come first between Moses and Aaron. They were brothers. They're from the same tribe.
No,
right?
I was looking at. Sorry, give me 1 second, Hamza. Okay, I was looking at Moses and Levi where they were in time. Okay, that's why I was a little bit mixed. Okay, that's the only thing.
So you accept now Aaron was from the tribe of Levi, yes?
Yes.
And you started your whole point connecting Mary to Aaron, yes?
Yes.
So what is the tribe of Mary?
Okay, now that's what my point. My point. Listen now carefully. Listen carefully. So Elizabeth and Mary were cousins. We agree. So which means their mothers were Levi.
Rafa.
Their mothers were Levi, but the father, the married father, is from David. So that's the difference. That's what I wanted to make my point. Okay.
Stop.
In the mother line, I agree that the mothers goes through Levi, but as I said,
stop. Rafa, let's just do this line by line. You started your whole point saying, why are we saying Mary's from Levi? You then connected Mary to Aaron. We then demonstrated Aaron was a Levite, which makes Mary a Levite. So your
mother line, Hamza, you didn't listen carefully. Through the mother's line.
Who was? Oh, you're saying Mary's father was from Judah?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Is a mother was from Levi. That's my point, Hamza.
And where did that lineage from?
Okay, that's what my point. Okay, if Elizabeth and Mary, okay, they were cousins, right? So which means we know that Elizabeth was Levi because her father was a Levi. Her mother has to be a Levi. Okay, so if her mother is Levi and Mary and her mother have to have the same mother, I agree with that. But the Bible says that Mary is from David, so for sure Mary's father is from David.
Where does it say the Bible's from? Where does it say she's from David? Mary?
But the lineage of Mary goes to David.
Where's that? Where'd you get that from?
If you go in Luke, you say that in Luke.
I thought you said she was connected to Aaron.
Through a mother line, Hamza.
So why did you go to Aaron through a mother's line? I don't get it then.
No, because I wanted to dispute your point. I say I agree that from the mother's line, she can go through Levi, through the Levi. I agree with that. But from the father's side, she's from David.
Now, what you did, you came and you said Mary is a descendant of Aaron.
Through a mother line. Through a mother line. That was, you didn't listen to that point. Or if I didn't say that, that's the point I wanted to make.
Where'd you get the lineage through the mother from?
I just explained to you.
Where are you reading this lineage? Where is this lineage? Where can I read it? Through the mother.
Okay, let's go slowly, Hamza. Okay, Elizabeth, you know they are cousins, right? Okay, which means Elizabeth's father is a Levi because her father was. There's no doubt about it. Her father was Zachariah was a Levi. Okay, so most of the time the Levi they marry within their own tribe. So which means Elizabeth's mother was a Levi. Okay, and I'm telling you that the Bible also says that Mary is from David. So which means Mary's father is from David. The only conclusion is that yes, Mary's mother is from Levi because she's a cousin of Elizabeth. Do you understand my point? So through a mother line, I agree that she is from Levi, but through a father line, she's from David. Do you understand my point, Hamza?
No, I'm trying to understand your point. I'm just looking at the lineage. 1 second. Imran, you just respond to him just while I just look at these a second.
Rafa, could I just ask you a question briefly?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you think I didn't hear, but I heard your little slight against Mary there. Do you think that Jesus is the son of David?
Yes.
How many children did David have?
How many children did he have? Yeah, a lot of children.
And one of them was named Jesus.
No, when you say son, that's actually a very good question. But in terms of the genealogy, that's what I was trying to make my point. Okay.
No.
When the Bible
one second. You were trying to attack the Quran with that snide comment on the side.
Yeah.
And I heard it, right?
Okay,
so I'm just pointing out.
Good,
See, when Christians do, I just want to point out, I'm not speaking down to you, just to be clear. But do you understand what Semitism is? Right? So this is the way in which they speak with each other. Only a person who has not studied Jewish literature and Arabic literature will make that point in the first place. So I accept you made the point, but you made a point in error. I just wanted to say that. But let Hamza do with the rest.
So now let me close my second point about the genealogy, because that's actually an important point I want to make. So in the genealogy given in a Bible, okay, whether it's the Old Testament or by Matthew, okay, they only focus on few elements. Okay, Matthew, for example, was showing the direct fathers of Jesus, ancestors of Jesus. So Matthew is not quoting all the people in the genealogies that you can find in the Old Testament. Matthew is focusing on only those who are the fathers of Jesus. And how we know that the Old Testament itself doesn't focus on all the genealogies. For example, if you go in
One second, Raf. I'm just going to read for you here. Matthew chapter 1, verse 17. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a different translation. There were thus 14 generations in all, but you just said to us that Matthew used, he didn't use all of it. You only used some of it.
Yes.
So is the author of Matthew right, or are you wrong?
No, in fact, when the Bible, Matthew is just doing something that exists already in the Old Testament. That's why I was giving you a reference.
Yeah, but he specifically said in all, and you said not all.
All those are the descendants of the ancestors of Jesus. All those are known as the ancestors of Jesus in the genealogies of the Jews. That's what he highlighted. Let me make this point.
No, he didn't say known. He said in totality, all of the genealogy. This is what I presented. There were only 14 generations. He doesn't say what you're saying.
Because, okay, let me make my point.
Can I ask a question, Rafael, very quickly on your point?
Yeah, there's a last point, important point before you ask. Sorry, can you allow me? So if you go to Genesis 10, okay, you have two genealogies of Sheba and Dedan, okay? You have a genealogy starting from Noah, Ham, Cush, Ramah, and Sheba, Dedan. You have 4 people. But the same genealogy is also given when you look on the other side through Abraham and Keturah, okay? From Abraham, Keturah, you have Joshkan and Sheba and Dedan. So in fact, Genesis missed 9 in fact, they didn't show 9 people in the genealogies of Sheba and Dedan because they wanted to make a specific point. Okay, so that's exactly what Matthew is.
What you're saying to me.
Yeah.
Genealogies don't have to be accurate, even if they say all. That's not really the point that I want to ask you about. So explain to me, because I'm trying to understand the point you were trying to make. So if you take an individual, where do they get their tribe lineage from? So how do they get allocated to a tribe? Is it through the mother or through the father?
Through the father.
Okay. Who was the father of Jesus?
His father was God, yeah.
So which tribe did God belong to?
Because Jesus was let me finish. Jesus was adopted by Joseph, and you know what? Most of the time in the Old Testament, you don't need to be a physical descendant to inherit that person.
Okay, alhamdulillah, that's fine. That's all I wanted to hear from you. Okay. So what you've said to me is that the Jesus was adopted into the tribe of David through Joseph.
Yeah, but through his mother also.
That's fine. So he's not a direct descendant of David.
Through his mother is a direct descendant through his mother also.
No, so that's why I specifically asked you the question of how is the tribe allocated to the individual. You've said to me, just hear me out, Rafa. You've said to me that the tribe is allocated through the father. I didn't put the words in your mouth.
Yeah.
And then I asked you a very simple question. Okay, who is the father of Jesus? And Muslims and Christians agree that there is no earthly father for Jesus, and therefore there is no lineage for Jesus. So
there's a caveat that you don't.
No, I understand. So what you then said was, and this is very important. I want to highlight this point. What you then said that he is adopted by Joseph. Now, adoption is obviously you don't have a lineage for the person who adopts you. And you said that that's where he gets that allocation from.
Not only that, also through Mary, and I explain you why.
I'm just reading something. Sorry to interrupt. Rafa. You said the Gospel of Luke is Mary's lineage. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Because to me, it looks like it's Joseph's lineage. Because it says, and Jesus, this is in Luke 3:23, and Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, was the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli. Yeah. So it's Joseph's lineage. What's it got to do with Mary?
As was supposed to. So based on
it says the supposed son of Joseph, and then it goes on to do Joseph's lineage.
It is Mary's lineage, and that
say that. It says Joseph, which was the son of Heli, which was the son of Mattat, which was there's no mention in Mary.
Okay, Heli was supposed to be the father of Mary.
It tells you the son of Joseph, and then goes on to say who he was the son of, and who he was the son of, and who he is the son.
Hold on. Do you hear what he just said? Heli is the father of Mary.
Suppose.
So then, wouldn't that be incest?
Why you say that?
1 second. How many generations back from Joseph go to Heli?
Joseph and then Heli.
Right, so that would make them brother and sister if they have the same dad.
I think that's the way Matthew. That's the way Matthew wrote it, to highlight the genealogy of a woman. Okay, because most of the time they do not highlight this.
Hold up.
That's how Matthew did that.
Rafa, hold up. It's not how Matthew did it. You just appealed to it as an evidence. You just said that Mary and Joseph had the same father. What does that imply? What does that? If in your country, is it legal for the children of the same parent to get married?
I don't know if I get all your point, Ijaz.
It's not a difficult point, Rafa. Rafa, do you have any siblings in your family?
Luke, and we're gonna talk about Luke.
No, not Luke. No. You appeal to. I just want to make the point clear. Let's just make the point clear. Do you have a sibling, a brother or a sister, Rafa?
Yes. So I don't.
Okay, so you have the same parents, right?
Okay, Joseph, based on what is said, Joseph, in Luke, it is referencing Joseph because they don't want to highlight Mary. Okay, that's what the church. That's how the church interpreted that passage. But they're saying that Eli is actually the father of Mary, and that's how it goes through Mary.
But so Scripture gets it wrong, but the church fathers get it right.
No, it's just how he wrote it for a people, so these people can interpret. They can understand and interpret what is meant by that. Okay, so and that's how it has always been. So we say Luke is talking about genealogy of Matthew and Mary, and Matthew. Jesus.
If I'm being fair to you, you should have never said the second point, because it just made things worse for you.
Why?
Do me a favor. When this stream is done, watch this 10-minute segment again. It did not end well. Rafa,
no, maybe in the way I'm explaining this, but I'm saying the church fathers, they consider that
Rafa, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you on the next stream.
I wish you all the best, Rafa. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Hamza, did you pay that guy to come on? Because I have. Nazam, were you texting Rafa help because he just bottled it?
Yeah, I don't think he needed my help. If I was going to try to help him, then...
Now it's been 2 hours.
Yeah, let's go. Let's quit.
Another good stream.
Okay. Do you want me to just quickly sum up?
Yeah, we need to Imran's summary.
Okay, so just to sort of sum. So very interesting stream. We raised the points that we'd raised in the last stream right at the beginning. So please have a look at those. And just in a brief summary, original Gospels of Mark that we have in Greek were untitled. Only a couple from the 2nd, possibly 3rd century, some papyri that contain about 5 or 6 verses on each of them. Most of the translations we have refer back to the Codex Sinaiticus, which is 4th century. And then we spoke about how Matthew is thought to be a disciple writing, and this was attributed to Papias, but Papias refers to a Hebrew writing of Matthew. And we don't have access to that at all. We spoke about how the Papias tradition doesn't really make sense, and the other thing that then we read, then lots of things came up. So this is quite interesting in this discussion. So the genealogy was discussed here, and we were talking about how the genealogy, although it states quite categorically 14 generations, and as Ijaz mentioned, all of the generations are recorded, we can see quite clearly that some were taken out when we compare it to the Old Testament. Brother Nazam spoke about how Zechariah 9:9 is a misinterpreted proof text that Matthew uses and starts talking, which he takes literally, and it's meant to be poetry in Hebrew, that then even brings out a prophecy that Matthew was in Matthew 21 that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on 2 donkeys. Then we had some brothers come to try and talk about this. So we had Daniel, very interesting guy. He was the Hebrew Israelite, and he started talking about Shem Tob's version of the Gospel of Matthew, which is a 14th century document, which we have no provenance for. We don't know where it came from, and he was trying to say that this was accurate. And then we had a Catholic brother, Reese, really great guy,
Reese,
very interesting, very interesting guy. Really, what he said was that Matthew was not an eyewitness. We don't really know who wrote it. It's not Bible is not a historical book, and the central message is not a historical one. So this is really the point that we're making. So he was really making our points for us. And he also said that he raised the point about oral tradition, but also admitted that oral tradition changed from book to book, so it wasn't really being preserved. Then we had DD, didn't really say much, just really wanted to talk about how Josephus was, just because Josephus didn't say it, it doesn't mean it didn't happen, even though he's writing a book about the atrocities of Herod, and there was no atrocities of the massacre of the children under the age of 2. A historical. And then last year we've had Rafa. You've heard what he's been saying. He was talking about Papiast tradition again, and didn't really understand the point that Papa was referring to a Hebrew text that we don't have access to. He also admitted that we don't know who wrote the Greek, which is an excellent point for us. This is really what we wanted to hear. And he said that Mark was a testimony of Peter. Again, taking the Gospel of Mark away from Mark completely. And then we had some interesting discussions about the genealogies. I won't go into Shem Tob's again. Now, the genealogies was fascinating because ultimately what he said was that the tribe is allocated to the individual through the father. Jesus has no father, therefore they cannot have an allocation of a genealogy. Now, this is interesting because Islamic... Go on. Brother.
Yeah, tribe. So Rafa was actually incorrect. Tribe is through the mother. It's maternal as opposed to paternal.
Sure.
So his argument in the end was not a good argument because he didn't start off with the correct statement.
Sure. But that's interesting because then let's say, because we're giving him this, that's very generous of you, Ijaz, but he is trying to come to explain to us why the genealogy works, and he's got everything upside down to start with. But it's interesting because what we've seen here is that most of the Christians who've come on have really thrown the historicity of Matthew under the bus, and they've said that this is not it's theological, it's not historical, and that's all that we've been saying from the beginning. So, Jazakallah, I know we've overrun a little bit on this. Anything else that anybody wants to say? Brother Nazam, Ijaz, Hamza?
I think you summed up beautifully. We're going to do one more on Matthew just to wrap it up. But we really are going to throw some more on the bonfire next week. Yeah. We're going to go into the zombies, and we're going to add quite a few new other historical fabrications that we believe the authors made, so we can really ram this topic home, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Wish all everyone the best. Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
Assalamu alaikum. So next week, yeah? Next week's the next one.
Same again.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalam, everyone.
Peace be upon you.